You want to bring us in, Maria or Katie? This is always like, which of the kids goes in the front seat? Like, it shouldn't be a big hierarchical deal, but it weirdly is.
I know. It is. Every time.
I don't understand.
I'm just saying, every time I do it, I'm like, oh shit. Is it going to be like, which of my kids do I love more?
Yes! I feel that, though. Maria's obviously the older sibling that just doesn't give a fuck, has long since outgrown the need for parental love. And I am now at this younger sibling point where I'm like, show me that you care.
You're like, I'm an adult.
I can do the big girl stuff.
I'm dying. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Textual Tension. It's me, your host, Maria, and with me today I have my handsome bitches, Katie and William.
Hey guys, what's up? I'm a spider. Chitter, chitter. Bang, bang. Anyway, the book we're doing today...
Try. William, you didn't even try.
I was like, it's actually, yeah, I was going to say it's more like... the book we're doing today is Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
Children of Time.
Already screwed it up,
right.
man.
The Children of Ruin
Jesus.
is the sequel. This book has a lot to do with spiders, and none of us knew that going in. But it was a very enjoyable book. This is a sci-fi book, so this video will do terrible. So hit the like button if you are actually watching this. We'll pretend in the title that we didn't like it, just so people click on it. But Maria, what is the premise of this book?
Children of Time is a who's who in the last survival attempts of humanity. Basically, the basic idea is humanity's Earth isn't looking too well. Humanity's going towards the stars. We're terraforming. We're setting up other planets. And one lady, there's this hotshot scientist, and by hotshot I mean the most proper, begrudging British lady you could ever imagine, named Kern. And she has thought of a scheme where she is going to take monkeys and throw them down on this planet that they've already terraformed. It's green, it's lush, and they've also thrown on Earth life. So there's mice, there's spiders, there's flies, there's mosquitoes, there's ants.
Wait. Say that again.
Mosquitoes.
Okay, continue.
Are those Hispanic mosquitoes?
Little uncle.
It's
uncle
just
mosquitoes.
how I say mosquitoes sometimes, guys. I say things weird. That's what you, of all the weird things I say, that's what you guys decide to be like, that's
Continue.
not a Mariaism.
I said nothing.
Jesus Christ. Do you know who I am? I will say anything wrong for effect. Anyway. So already there's life here, and they just have they're going to throw literally a barrel of monkeys at the planet, and then release a nanovirus that is going to help the chimpanzees evolve. I think it was chimpanzees. I don't remember. At a certain point, they just started saying monkeys. It might have been bonobos, whatever the case is. It is a barrel of monkeys at the planet, and then the nanovirus will come and help them evolve faster, so that by the time humans actually need this planet and need to colonize it, there is already a human-esque intelligent species on here that has also had while all that's happening on the planet, there's going to be a guy just floating around in space who's going to guide them and help them once they get to the point that they can intercept a radio signal and respond. And so the idea is we're going to create a different evolution of humans that we have a hand in guiding along the journey. But, oh no, plans go awry. Avrana's group of humans who are like, yes, we're gonna fuck around, terraform, make other life. And then there's the like, no, we're not doing that. That's too much. We've gone too far. Have a war. And one of the guys infiltrates her team and just blows everything up. Avrana has to run, and now she's stuck in the pod that was supposed to have just some dumb guy that she didn't actually care about stuck in it, and now she has to look upon her experiment. Except, oh no, the barrel of monkeys, when the ship got blown up, also gets blown up and hits the planet and goes poof in fire. And so, oh no, Avrana's experiment, but the nanovirus hits the planet and finds other things to live in and evolve. And then also that's like thread one. Thread two is thousands of years in the future, humanity came back from the brink of collapse after Avrana's humans destroyed everything and created an ice age. And then when that ice age melted, they realized the ice age was holding in a ton of toxic chemicals. So now the last vestiges of humanity have gone forth in ark ships to find a potential home. They are so far removed from Avrana's portion of humanity, they cannot, few people even read the language that the previous humans spoke. They don't understand their technology at all, and all they've been doing is trying to ape what their ancient forebearers did before them. But now they are in space. They're going forward. Their tech isn't as good as the previous humans, but they're here to try find a home, God damn it. And where do they stumble upon? Kern's world, where the nanovirus has done some weird shit. And that's the story. That's the premise.
Bam.
You've been premised.
And again, like I said, so just to give it away, the animals that the protein latches onto to evolve are spiders, which is why everybody in the Discord started spamming Team Spiders. And I hadn't started the book yet. And I was like, what? By the way, I am not Team Spider. I am Team Ant. Down with the matriarchy. Long live the hive.
God. I was wondering. I mean, yeah, in a way, I feel okay, so I'm going to be real. I just want to mention this right now. One of the things that haunts me constantly in general, especially as being attempting to be an educator in this, I guess, any age, truly. It just constantly occurs to me, especially in this book as it progresses, and you see how the spiders evolve and how their societal structure manifests and such. And I'm just like, why do we have to have class systems? Is it the sense of self? Do we always have to have class systems that develop into horrible constructs that put down people? Why can't we have a Star Trek society? And by Star Trek society, I just mean
we're getting there. We're getting there. It's coming.
This is actually one of the big themes of the book that I appreciated is like, what is civilization? How would different animal aliens handle it? And one of my critiques of the book is that I don't necessarily think it handles that part great in the end. It handles it really well right until the end. But we should state out right off the bat, we all adored this book.
Yeah.
We all really loved it. It's such a good book.
I feel like it's Christmas. I got 2 good books in 2 weeks.
And we get to read the sequels next month. And you and I don't have to do the dumb vampire book. Katie, you do have to do the dumb vampire book. Sorry.
What?
You're doing with Lindbergh and
are doing sexy vampire book. But you actually might like it, so who knows?
Okay, look you. But before you go on as well, one thing that was really nice about this book is that it genuinely was so fresh. There were no tiresome tropes. There were no
shadow daddies.
Recycled shadow daddy, sexual tension. It just, again, it's the difference in genre as well. So there's that. But it was very refreshing.
It was good sci-fi. Because it is you were saying something before. I cut you off. Continue. Say your thing.
No, you're right. Saying what you were saying, it's really good sci-fi. The strengths of this book are the plot. It moves very fast. There was one part where I ended up listening an extra hour because I kept hitting cliffhangers that I wanted to know the next part of. Part of that is because you're a little bit distanced from the characters, and so it's focused on the plot, which is really nice. The world building is so delightful. It's so much fun to read. And the author actually can really have emotional chops. There's several points of people panicking in this book that you feel. And so and he's such a creative writer with how he puts the world building together. Again, I'm going to have a few foibles, especially towards the end of the book that we'll talk about when we get there. But oh man, I loved this was so much fun to read.
And it was a really fun, I thought the author did a great job with body horror in certain moments where it kind of was nice little jewels in the headset of this piece. It's because when they occurred, they did not occur frequently, but when they did, it was really almost fantastical in the way. It almost like it's not like it went into a fantasy genre, but the tone shifted just a little bit more into horror and like a fantastical horror in those moments where we really edge on the verge of like science fiction into fantasy in some ways. And when those parts happen, that tonal shift was not a detracting factor, but rather an adding factor. And there's also one part I felt like in the book, when we get to it, I'll mention that it is the part where I thought the tone of the novel shifted. And I thought that was a really smart move in that particular moment, because I felt like it made things more visceral, I guess, in a way, and it made you connect with the characters more. And when it brought in more of a human element and a more macro view of some things rather than the micro view that it originally takes, because it's developing a lot of things. And overall, just the formula for this, and I agree with Will, with the exception of the ending, which I thought was bizarre. It's not bad ending, but it's just, I didn't want that, I guess. But that's just me.
I don't think thematically it quite comes together correctly. I think throughout a large part of this book, I was like, these two plot lines are really good, but I don't know quite how the author's going to make them connect.
Yeah.
And like, I don't love his answer, but I mean, at the same time, the book does what it does well, which is world building up until that point.
I was thinking about this because Will and I had a very brief interaction over text this morning, kind of about our thoughts, and he mentioned a couple of his things. And while I agree, like objectively, I think I realized as I was processing it. So I'm glad we had that conversation. Will, I think what the author was trying to do, he did. I just don't necessarily know if that is. And I feel for it because in a lot of ways it holds an ideal that I would like, and I'll talk about that when we get to the ending. But I want to talk about the tone piece of this. Something the story does well, and for me, not for Will in the beginning, I think, because we did talk about this, is I've read a lot of sci-fi. And I can struggle when it is harder sci-fi. So a book that I compared this to, because in the scale of the amount of years going by, it has some things going for it, but very different tone. And the one is very clearly hard sci-fi, where this is sci-fi edging on fantasy. Like it has a whimsy to it, and rather than hard sci-fi. But the book starts with this almost irreverent tone. There is a tone to the book that is cheeky. It is a cheeky tone. The narrator is cheeky. There's the way this is told is there is the characters whose heads we're in, but then there is this omniscient narrator who is giving us information very clearly. There's literally points where you're in a character's point of view, and then all of a sudden it's the third voice, the third person omniscient going, that character couldn't even begin to understand these other things. So there is this omniscient, and that omniscient voice is very cheeky in a lot of ways in how it puts the story. And there is a bit of absurdity at the beginning. There's this lady obsessed with her monkeys and this experiment who is so closed-minded, she cannot see why anyone else would have a problem with it. And then you're like, spiders. The nanovirus picked spiders to do this, and there is this sense of absurdity where you're like, oh, that's not at all where I thought this was going. And slowly it begins to shed the cheekiness, because as the story goes on, you get less of the omniscient narrator, and the characters completely take hold of the story and become the people you're kind of reading it through. Even and I say characters where I'm considering Spider Society as a whole a character, because you pop in and out of a ton of their things. And then, like William said, it hits in emotional moments. Like all of a sudden, this book that you couldn't even have imagined really getting tense or impact. Like there was this one moment, and I think Will and I had the same moment, where about an hour before the end, you're just like, this is a bit much. I need a break. I need to walk away. I need to process how this is potentially going to go. And it gives you that. It has some horror in it with the concepts, the existential dread.
I agree. Sorry not to cut you off, but but I'm going to. So I found that too. I don't like cheeky tones as much as Maria. Maria loves some whimsy. I hate some whimsy. But I found the tone very effective at first, even though I was like, that's not exactly. I would have preferred a little bit more Warhammer, a little less
grimdark,
British sci-fi. I want a little more grimdark, but I actually thought it was really effective. And it has that darkness that like sometimes you watch British comedy skits and they're so funny, but they're also so bleak underneath by the underlying concepts of like the world and what's going on in it. And that was this book for me, is that like there is a point, towards the end, about 2/3 of the way through, where I was like, I need to take a break. Part of it is that I personally have a lot of existential anxieties about like decay and entropy and the widening gear, the center cannot hold, that kind of stuff. Like what does this all matter if we're all forgotten and rust and decay? And I was trying to clean my room while I was listening to this part, and it just felt utterly hopeless. And I was like, you need to take a break. You need to chill out for a little bit.
That's interesting. I never experienced that. Before we move on, Lindbergh wants to know what the hard sci-fi book was. Maria.
The three-body problem. I'm going to talk about how there's a note Will makes about a trope that happens with aliens and humans, and that book goes hard in the opposite direction, where everyone sucks here. That book really prescribes to the idea of the dark forest theory of life in a universe.
Prisoner's dilemma.
Yes, and exactly, the prisoner's dilemma. And that's why I compared them a lot, especially by the end, because this book and that book posit the same question and come to completely different answers about it.
Why don't you explain what that is for people who do not know?
Okay, the thing is, I was going to wait for it to where we got to it in the book.
I know, it's just relevant at this moment because you mentioned the prisoner's dilemma. So just mention the definition of it. No, I just meant the prisoner's dilemma.
Prisoner's dilemma is if you have two prisoners, both who committed a crime together, and they're in separate interrogation rooms, and the police go to both and say, hey, if you are the first to tell me important information, your sentence will be lighter. And you go, oh, crap, because maybe the other person is going to do it. And so you both are now kind of working against each other, because if you could both trust each other, you guys could both not tell the police and get out alive. But how much do you trust the other person not to do it for their own good? And you're now also thinking, oh, shit, maybe I should do it before they do it.
Yes, and the dark forest is a very similar thing, except it's a bit different. It's the idea of if you are in a dark forest and you hear a twig snap, what is the impulse you have? And the idea is the correct impulse for your own personal safety is to eradicate what is out there. And within the context of the three-body whatever that, I forgot what the series is called, but it comes up in the second book and a lot in the third book, is that if you are a planet and you're vibing out in space and you receive a signal that that means that is another society that is far enough into their evolution and smart enough to be able to be space-faring, they are automatically a threat. That a radio signal coming from a planet, so like us humans just minding our business, being like, oh, I'm going to send something and see if it comes back. No. If the other civilizations out there, the alien civilizations, hear the twig snap, they just eradicate. They don't broker peace. They always assume, and there's literally a point in this book where that is happening. The assumption is maybe peace could happen, but the safest course is to just go in guns blazing. And the three-body problem series has that, where like everyone in the society, and it's a huge actually existential issue, because if everybody just keeps killing each other, and they start doing it by collapsing
stars?
Not stars. Oh God, what are they called? Dimensions.
What?
They start collapsing dimensions. So they take our dimension and collapse us into the second. It was one of the most harrowing experiences to read about. Because you cannot beat it. Because that's what because not only are you fighting with intelligences in your dimension, but you're also fighting intelligences in other dimensions. But anyway,
I want you to know, this is a really big reason why I stopped watching Marvel. I'm so tired of this constant is it weird? Maybe my nihilism is just getting the best of me, but I'm just exhausted seeing fiction represent humanity at this moment. That's why I like this book so much, to bring it back all around, is that I like the tone so much better of what's happening here. It's so much more. I mean, like, I wouldn't necessarily call it hopeful, but like it is. And that's funny that you call it a cheeky tone, though. And I'll keep this short, but I think it's funny you call it a cheeky tone. I didn't identify it as cheeky. I see where you see that, but it's just more like I don't even lighthearted.
Yes.
Yes, just lighthearted.
But,
and it's
like,
really
the
nice.
narrator's a little cheeky.
I get what you're saying. Also, the depiction of characters is cheeky. Like there are good interactions happening. There's light in each of these chapters where there are like it's like the good in humanity or in the good in spiderhood, whatever. But yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so they come to very different conclusions, and I think the three-body problem is probably if Will could ever get past the fact that they are just the three chonky-ass boy books, because it has the dark,
They're so huge.
And the thing is, Will, they have everything you love. They are dark. They are they're grimdark. They're depressing. The reality is just.
Are they poetic?
Is there a hot bitchy girl?
No, that's the one thing.
Wait, pause. But just evaluate what we each of us asked. Is it poetic? Is there a hot bitchy girl?
It also has that narrative distance that you love. That for me was actually one of the things that took me a very long time to get into the book.
Real literature.
Exactly. It has all of that. It deals with this trope, and it doesn't go the way you don't like. I think it goes headfirst into the like. Life is complicated and civilizations overall but it also I think would fuck you up because the existential things it goes into is insane. It would be absolute. So I don't know if you could ever get through it outside of just looking at them and you going too long. But
yeah, that sounds like a lot.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see if we'll do it.
Lindbergh and I could do it.
Okay, no, but this is the problem where I have to pick books for you guys to do without me that I don't have FOMO over. And I have
I know.
There are certain books
yeah, right.
I don't want to be left out of videos on, but I don't necessarily want to read the book. So like War and Peace, you and her could do, but like I kind of don't want to be left out of it. All Quiet on the Western Front. I also don't want to read, but also I don't want to be left out of it. But anyway, my insecurity's over. The
Western Front is very short. You could absolutely.
It's so depressing though.
It is.
Yes, but it's short.
It's also hopeful. There's a sense of hope to it.
There is, and also the descriptions alone would be actually a really good point for our close critique study.
It's one of my favorite books that school ever made me read.
Before my military history or military fiction / Warhammer arc, maybe we'll read it. But okay, you guys want to get started with the plot?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So this book, as Maria says, starts with Avrana Kern, who we actually just start with her giving a speech about the planet that they're at and the terraforming, and she has a little bit of a god complex.
A little bit, William?
The way she got this, well, just wait. The way she got, her plan to uplift these monkeys is, the way she got funding was like, oh, okay, they'll be basically like a servant race ready to serve us once we get to this planet. But she's like, in her head, she's like, haha, you fools, I'm going to seed the world with different life to see where it goes. And she like is very haughty and thinks she's great. And as Maria said, okay, go ahead.
I just want to mention when you're done something. Go ahead.
Okay. And so, they're on this platform. One of the people is going to monitor it while she goes off and sees other worlds. But the person who's going to monitor it is basically like a Green New Deal radical terrorist, eco-terrorist, who's like, no, there's a whole faction of us who don't want to move beyond the stars, and we're going to start a civil war, and this is the first moment of it. And he like sabotages everything, and she has to run and be part of the she has to be the one who's going to be going to cryostasis
and observing the planet and waiting for it, because it's going to beam down a radio signal of math problems, and eventually, ideally, the monkeys beam back. Specifically, two things happen here that are very important. She's in the cryopod. She watches her monkeys get exploded. They hit the planet. They go through when they crash down. Fiery monkeys, poor monkeys. She's much sadder about the monkeys than about all of her friends burning up in the rest of her ship.
To be fair, she does have a moment of empathy where she thinks about that, and she thinks, oh, all the people, all my friends, all my colleagues, everything I've ever known is now gone. It is all just confetti in space. But Maria, mention the second important thing, and then I want to mention some stuff.
So the second thing that happens is in her little pod that she's in, and she's like, oh great, now I'm going to be the one that have to go to sleep. I was supposed to go do other things. A patsy was supposed to do this. There is an AI in the computer, like in the pod with her, that's basically like, how do you want to handle this? And she's like, while I sleep, I need an AI smart enough, that is acting in my interest to monitor the situation. So she decides to upload her mind into the computer system.
Which, of course, you immediately know is probably not going to end well existentially.
But I think ultimately ends up fine.
It does.
In the end. For a while, lots of terror.
Yes.
She's not uploading in that she's going into the computer. She's essentially making a copy of her brain.
She's scanning.
She's just taking her mind, and she herself will still be separate, but she's putting her brain just so that the AI is working off of what her ideas of it are. The AI itself is also just kind of British as well, and takes the kind of has, so there's like 3 entities that end up on this ship. There's the original AI, there's the AI that is her mind, that was her mind, and then there is the actual human Vrana Kern.
Yes.
And she goes to sleep.
And there's a couple of things I want to mention, though, before we move on from the scene that is really, really stood out to me on like a technical level.
Also, this is so not relevant, but I just want people to know the squeaking sound is Maria's chair.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. It is the squeakiest chair. I can't do anything about it. I don't live here. I mean, I live here, but I don't own this.
This chair.
Just awkwardly stand mannequin style in front of the camera where all we see is your chest and downwards. Oh, God, please stop. Jesus.
It's bad. Okay.
Will just got so massively uncomfortable.
So it was just loud on my end. I don't know why.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
I have my headphones turned down really low. But anyway, so technically speaking, there's several things that are incredibly successful here for an opening scene. Number one, it jumps us right into the speech. And so it gives us that is the thesis for like one whole thread of the whole novel. So it immediately gives us like the set dressing, the stage directions that are necessary to have the premise of this planet and everything. So we understand it. And we get it from a narrative that, from the perspective of a character that created it, and she's a scientist. She's technical in the way her mind works. So the exposition comes across as incredibly natural, despite the fact that it is exposition on the stuff. Plus, she's giving a speech, and it's supposed to go back to the planet and kind of be shown to everybody else. So even though she knows this and she's rehearsed it a million times, at the same time, we're also being given like context as far as where everything else is in the world, and it all seamlessly comes in together. So that way you get a painted picture of where we are, like in this sci-fi world. Second is the characterization of her. Like it has been stated, she is incredibly self-centered and has a god complex. And it's almost, it borders, yes, and it borders on the line of hammy in some places, but it ends up coming across as nicely comedic when it balances out with the severity of the situation. And also, she's a little bit hateful. So the hatefulness combined with her belittling of like things that she sees as lesser than for her comes across in this nice, natural, almost like it's a believable personality instead of just a characterization or a caricature, excuse me. So we get a really interesting character right off the bat. We get a character that gives us everything we need to know very quickly, and we get an action scene for an explosion. So we're also immediately jettisoned into action and terror and a whole bunch of other stuff. So this is just, if anything, if you're unsure if you want to read this novel, just read the first chapter and you will get immediately hooked. It's because it does everything right for a first chapter of a novel.
It is really kind of cool because you'd think starting with a speech and the character just thinking about things would be boring, but it's really not because what they're talking about is interesting and it's told from a little bit of a distance. And
you
it's
also get the
dissonance.
The dissonance between what she's saying versus what she's thinking. So as it's happening, you're like, oh, everybody else doesn't actually know what's going on in her head, but continue, Will.
Yeah, no, and so, no, that's about what I was going to say is, like, it is, like Katie said, actually very effective, and it's short. Like, the plot starts immediately as soon as this guy is like, you suck. We're going to rule with the consent of the governed or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool. And then what happens is the next scene after this is her waking up, like, 15 years later, and her talking to the computer and then being like, why did you wake me up? Yeah, like, is the rescue mission here? And we find out that, no, actually, there was a big, like, war that completely, like, wiped out humanity between these two people. All their colonies, like, in the inner solar system basically died out. It's all, there's no one, they're left, but they're all, like, very low tech at this point. And this is the part...
when she was making the speech, they had already died because of the space travel time. So she also has a moment of realization that this dude blew up her experiment for nothing. The Earth was already gone. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, and she and there was like a virus that killed everyone but her computer because her computer had like this experimental upload thing. And this is the moment where I was like, oh, this book can do real emotional moves because you really feel her panic and terror in this moment. And you're like, oh, shit. I mean, again, partly it's because I find that kind of space is huge and your meaningless existential horror just hits me really hard. But I think it's effective at being like, oh, you're alone and you're now trapped. You're trapped with this AI in this cabin. And she's like, I want to go back to sleep. Don't tell me until my monkeys are, responding. Like, that's it. I don't want to hear about it. There's such a sense of panic with what's going on.
Yeah. Miss Allie Snow has some great comments coming in at the bottom. For there were some ones earlier about the other scene, but she makes the point that I was afraid that Avrana Kern was going to be the main POV character, and that would have been too much with her megalomaniacal tendencies. But then also speaking directly to what you're just saying, which is that moment of realizing no one is coming, it encapsulates it in almost a fetus nature of, I'm just going to cryosleep. There is nothing. This pod was designed for nothing but sleeping, waking up, feeding things to the monkeys, and then going back to sleep. And she gives the computer specific parameters with which to wake her in, and they're automatically, you as a reader are like, oh, these are kind of hopeless parameters.
Yeah. And can you really blame the guy originally for blowing up the ship? I mean, his life was gonna be this.
I mean, yes and no, because he would have basically woken up like once every like 10 years, sent some codes, and then in like subjective time, after a few months, he would have been woken up by the new crew of people getting there.
That is true.
That's that whole subjective versus non-subjective time. Yeah, her problem is that she's in a 20-foot cube for the rest of existence, and there's nothing else left.
This is it went from him just being a guy on a thing who has to like monitor, like the guy in an experiment who just has to monitor the subjects, but eventually is going to rejoin society, to this, and it is like just immediately this existential slap in the face.
When we get to, so the nanovirus, we're going to move on from here, but when we get to the nanovirus part and how it affects spiders and how they evolve, can I just say before I forget now, because I am certainly going to forget this thought that just stray came to me, it reminds me so much of skill trees in video games. I'm just like, oh, they're building their skill trees.
But written in a way that doesn't make you want to stab ice picks into yourself.
Oh, yeah, okay. Great comparison to another novel that does that. But anyway, continue.
Well, actually, that's the next thing, which is that we get, this is the A plot that we'll be getting, which is about the spiders, which is basically this virus that the monkeys were supposed to have that was supposed to uplift them. Monkeys all died, but it latched on to the insects in the environment. And it's working a little bit different. Well, spiders aren't insects. The bugs in the environment.
The invertebrates.
The invertebrates. Because it
invertebrates,
does
yes.
all invertebrates. It was specifically programmed to ignore any other mammals outside of
Mhm.
monkeys. So the mice, everyone else is just going on at normal levels of evolution. But the invertebrates now have something that they were not expecting and not prepared for.
And basically we start with like this one jumping spider who's hunting, and they're like a little smarter than normal, and they see a male come up. And usually males in spiders, like, they get eaten because they're smaller, or they get mated with and then eaten. But here the spider is like, what if we work together? There's a spark of recognition between the two of them. And this is told from more of an omniscient point of view than the B plot that we'll get with the humans, which is very limited third person. In this one, the narrator will be like, and it didn't know it, but the virus was doing this or that. Which is really cool because it feels very science accurate, even though I'm sure parts of this book aren't. Like, I'm sure, and towards the end, there gets to be a bit more of like magic with more steps problem, but especially early on, you're like, oh, I know it's not hard sci-fi, but it really feels like hard sci-fi. Like, he's done the research.
You know why? Because it feels like a David Attenborough documentary of animals.
You're right.
It just like the cheeky tone. It's David fucking Attenborough's documentary narration. Because there is that like tone of like loving reverence, but also like cheeky knowing of what they don't understand in the narration. But
and what we have.
It does give you a sense of like, ooh, scientific plausibility through the guise of putting you in the language of a documentary without it feeling like a documentary.
And it's a really fun shift from what we just were given to this, where you, first of all, get to see the immediate effect. Like, we know that the nanovirus has gone down there. We haven't been introduced yet to the ship that we will introduce shortly, which is the other thread. And in this moment, we have the very beginnings of a very deep relationship that transcends time between the one female jumping spider who is currently, like, you know, trying to finagle with this spitting spider, and the smaller male spider who comes along, and they end up, like, you know, teaming up, like William said. So this is the very first dance across centuries between conjoined souls.
I should say, yeah. So one of the things about this book is that we'll jump to different spiders from different generations, but there's always 3 spiders, and one of them is called Portia. The first one you meet in every POV is Portia. Then there will be one called Bianca, who's the second one you meet, and then there will be a male spider called Fabian.
Yes, and then eventually a couple of violas that we run into.
Oh yes, that's true. The viola shows up. I forgot about that. But and like it's interesting because the by doing this is very clever because
I wanted to mention this. Go.
You go ahead. Why is it clever?
I just thought it was so clever. It's such a smart idea, and it's so simple because in order to see the evolution of the spiders and to track it, but to also have an emotional anchor point so that way you can follow the trajectory of an adventure, the author keeps the same names with the same spiders, and it's their offspring. So it's like an ancestral line of the same character. So it almost feels like you're following the same character one generation after the next in spiderhood, but it's actually technically not. And it works out well because the nanovirus like allows for them to, like, you know, give off these really cool evolutionary things. So that way these learned behaviors are passed on and stuff. So it is similar in personality, which would logically make sense because of the setup of the novel. So by keeping them named the same thing, you get to have an anchor, like I said, an anchor point of emotion as they develop and become bigger, more fuller versions of themselves.
Yeah, and it's the thing is he's also very good at creating like slightly likable characters from very little meat, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So like every time you drop in, you're like, oh, okay, I like this. I like this Portia, this Bianca, and this Fabian. Fabian for the win. That's what's up, guys. He's
oh my god,
Fabian
love.
I know
Fabian, and then Fabian 2 made me cry. Like, oh my god,
I love the voice the narrator gives him. He's very flat. Like,
screw Portia. Yeah. I know Portia's great. Portia's amazing. I know. But she's like kind of like, you know, Xena like overblown. Like we don't need. Yes, I see
Well,
you.
no, I was going to say the one thing that's a little confusing is which of the Fabian is usually just the male spider, but Bianca and Portia kind of change who's the smart one and who's like the dumb one.
They do.
But I kind of didn't like that because it was kind of like, why do we name them like this? Then why don't we just keep that consistent?
To show their personal growths differently.
No. It has nothing to do with that. Because you can have ancestors and offspring that are completely.
I know.
And so, because the names follow ancestral lines, not personality lines. Because we have a Portia who's like head scientist, and we have a Bianca. So we have Portia who's the smart one, and the analytical one, and Bianca's the muscle girl. And then eventually down the line, Portia's muscle girl, and Bianca is smartest girl in school. And so we're following the ancestral lines. So like at no point was I like, why isn't Portia the smart one anymore?
See, I think I would have preferred it if it hadn't been ancestral lines. It has just been thematic lines. Like the name is,
interesting.
But yeah, I mean, it's fine. Like I'm just quibbling. Like
it's that
it works so effectively.
I want to highlight Lindbergh's, which is a much smarter, more beautiful
Friend of the
way
channel.
of saying what I rambled on about, which is that the spider POV successfully tells a dynastical tale over generations within the confines of a single book, and it's brilliant. I hate that. Why people who are not Americans speak so much better than Americans.
I almost literally at the last minute was like, "You want to join Lindbergh?" But I was like, "This is gonna be 4 people. That's gonna be so many people."
So much.
It's my fault. It's because I jumped on the ragtag.
No, you. No, that's not why. No, it's just the thing is, I may not actually even edit this one. I think for Absolution, the 3rd Annihilation book, or the 4th one, I'm just gonna add her because I'm not gonna edit it at all anyway, and nobody's gonna watch it, so we might as well have fun.
Yeah.
But
By the way, I started that a while ago. I'm gonna have to restart it now. But man, anyway, I won't get off topic. Sorry.
Yes. But yeah. So, and it's really cool, and it starts with this Portia and this Fabian, which is just like. Just the very spiders. And then what happens is that we switch to plotline B, which is humans in an ark ship, which is like there's a ton of humans in cryostasis and they're going to a new planet. And these are keep referring back to the old empire, which was the time period that Avarana Kern comes from, when humans were like super cool and awesome. Think if you're a Warhammer fan, humans during the Dark Age of humanity. And they developed basically after this big not nuclear, it was an ice age, wiped out humanity, and they kind of recannibalized some of the technology from the old empire, but they don't really understand it very well. But also, they have their society is essentially collapsing, and this ark ship, along with 1 or 2 others, are the only things left. And we start from the viewpoint of Halston, who is a classicist, which is very funny because they only ever wake him up to like translate things, and nobody really respects him as an academic. It's really, I thought it was really funny at first.
And it's not even like they're even coming from him from history. What should we know? It's more just like translate this. It's literally just like translations. It is never like, we need your understanding. How did they work? And it is. And it's so funny. It gave me, if anyone has ever watched the show, I'm blanking. The Good Place and the Everybody Hates Moral Philosophers line. This book gave me Everybody Hates Classicists. Vibes.
Which,
and it was just really funny. Like the whole time, he's just this like PhD academic who's just been taken out of any world he knows and is now the least important person on a ship.
Not just that though, but also it's later on like explained to some degree that his profession was in a decline at the time because when they left Earth, because as the ice age was melting and stuff, prior to that they were like, let us learn the ways of the old empire so that way we can become great again. And slowly but surely, as the toxic material and all that stuff came back, they were like, F the old empire, they were awful, they're polluting our world once more. And so all of the old empire stuff was like, instead of it being like the Gilded Age, it's slid into more of a negative tone. And so his profession not only was no longer needed because they needed to learn how to like do something about the toxic stuff happening, I guess. It doesn't really go into it too much. But then, like, you know, at that point, oh, wait, yeah. So they don't need to, like, transcribe any of that stuff. Instead, they're just like, let's get off the earth. So, you know, anyway.
And they basically are like, oh, okay, we found one signal left from the old empire, and that's Kern's world, which is what the planet had a name, but internally she thought of it as Kern's world, and so that just becomes the name. And so he wakes up, everybody's like, okay, you translated it, that's fine. And he's like, can I just stay awake for like 12 hours? Like, this is the only time I get to wake up from storage. And they're all like, okay. And the other main character in this plot line is
Lane.
Lane.
Issa Lane.
Lane.
Issa Lane, who is the engineer, and she is like real bitchy to him, but then they have sex once everybody else has left. She is a great character because it's like she does not respect him, it seems like, but also there's like a depth of feeling there that she just doesn't hide, and she's very practical. And so like right off the bat, you get, again, there's a sort of a distanced kind of British narrator tone to the book, but there's still like some very genuine emotion underpinning it. And again, I liked Halston at first because it's very like nobody takes him seriously, and like that gives you like a little bit of an underdog, like, okay, he's gonna come into his own, and he doesn't. But
her personality reminds me of every single fiery Scottish woman engineer in any sci-fi slash anything.
But who ends up having to take a completely different role than those characters ever normally have to be in.
Yeah, it kind of like I kind of
would we cast her with Michelle Rodriguez in the movie?
Oh my gosh, yes, I would. So I was gonna say, it reminds me of she also vaguely reminded me of the chick from Atlantis, the animated movie, where she was then
the mechanic.
Yes, but you know, Scottish and like whatever she's supposed to look like. I don't remember if she has red hair or not, but I always pictured her with red hair because of the Scottish tone. So like no, she's got that I'm a tough love kind of woman, and I have a soft, gooey inside if you get past the hard exterior.
But I'm never going to tell you about it. It's always going to be... Yeah, no, it's true. I really liked her as a character. I have quibbles with the end of the book, but she's such a strong and vivid character. So right off the bat with these two plot lines, you as the reader, or an English nerd, if you're listening to this, welcome. You're like, oh, okay, so this book is going to be about the descendants of humanity and the choices they make. Both of these, the one is spider and one is man, are the children of man. And I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. So there's a book I'm going to maybe reference a few times called All Our Tomorrows or All Our Futures. And it's about like, basically the author wanted to draw a bunch of alien-looking humans who are adapted to their environment. So like you have like humans with like trunks who become like elephants, or you have humans who like become winged or something like that. And I forget what his name is. I don't know. He's a really cool guy. But anyway, there are parts of it where it's like one of the descendants of humans, once they go through like an extinction event and come back, are lizards that escaped on the ship, and everybody treats them just like they're human because even though they're genetically not the same. And I was like, oh, this is kind of a similar thing. They're both like, what do genetics matter when it comes to the legacy of a species?
Intelligence.
And so I thought these were really interesting parallels, but they're also the wrong parallels because this book is not really you think. I'll leave that for later because you kind of need to understand more. But initially, you're like, oh, okay, this is really cool. What's going to happen when these two children meet?
Yes, and initially, when everybody comes up and when they wake Halston up, it's because they're close to Kern's world. They found that radio signal and they need him to translate it, and it is a distress beacon, but also simultaneously something else is being shot down to the planet, and they realize it's math equations. And when they reach out to talk to the satellite immediately is like, the distress beacon stops, and they're like, fuck off. Why are you here? This is a closed experiment. You cannot interact with this planet. And they try to explain, and the entity they're speaking to is Eliza. And refers to herself as Eliza Kern. So you yourself are like, well, that's not Avrana. Where's our girl Avrana? And
Can I describe this part because it's like my favorite thing?
Please.
Basically,
it would
what's
be
happened-
your favorite thing,
Oh,
you madness
I love
lover.
robots. I love robots. I love body horror. I love cyborgs. Okay.
I do want to,
Go.
when you're done with this, though, let's take a pause and explain the spider side.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I think that happens first, but we'll discuss this first because it doesn't play in yet.
Okay.
Basically, Ivana Kern has been in there so much longer than was allowed that she's begun to fuse with the AI, like the body, her mind, and the AI. They're kind of interconnected now, and so even as he's getting signals from Eliza, which is like the AI. He's also getting these other underlying signals, which is like the stream of consciousness of Rana Kern. And the way the narrator says these, it's so panicked and just claustrophobic because she's like, I want to die. I want to die. What is going on? Where's Eliza? Oh God, I've been
Where
stuck
are
here
my
forever for
eyes?
thousands of years. Why can't I wake up? And you're like, holy shit. Again, it's like cyborgs and body horror. And I loved it and trapped that claustrophobia. And again, this is one of the places where the book is like, we were joking and we're still joking, but like, this is fucking awful.
Yeah. And there's the moment of realizing that her body must be so dead or decayed. Like that because there technically is three entities. There's Eliza, which is the original ship AI. There is Avrana Kern, the AI. And then there is the vestiges of Avrana Kern, the human. And that is the one panic screaming into the void of the universe. And it is...
What
I
what
loved
got
it.
me the most is when she was like, why can't I see? Where are my eyes?
Yeah.
Where are my eyes? Where are my... Ooh.
I don't know how well it works in text form. I assume it still works very well, but especially the way the narrator does it, I was like having an anxiety. I don't have anxiety attacks, but like that's how it felt
also.
almost.
Yeah,
So,
no, it
and-
definitely bled into my personal fear of like loss of self.
And the thing is, I'm sure if you guys have seen the channel, I very much find questions of identity and AI interesting. So for me, it was such a cool question of like, where does she end and where is the computer beginning? Because as time goes on, the two are going to mold more and more. Meld. Mold is a different thing. But jumping back to the spider plot line, which happened before this, we are now, I think, in a different Portia. I'm not sure if it's the same Portia or not.
What happens next, technically, is that we get another Portia. And this time, the Portia is with Bianca, who is her muscle. And then you get Fabian, who is the lowly male, who is just nothing but like a whatever. But he's there to help.
Yeah,
And
the spiders are very sexist throughout this book, and it's really funny. I just thought it was hilarious because they're like, male spiders are just good for dancing and eating, at the beginning.
And it's funny, though, because it makes sense. Like, I know a lot of people were like, why does this have to be here? Like, why do we have to have sexist spiders? But from a biological imperative, it makes way more
total
sense for the spiders to be sexist than it ever made for humans to be sexist.
Yeah, they have way more sexual dimorphism going on than humans. Humans have a very low amount of sexual dimorphism.
And also, they just mainly ate males. Like, a lot of, like, especially if you look at jumping spiders, you mate, you eat them. Like, that's just kind of how it worked.
Exactly. Will, do you want to say something before I go on?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is as the society develops, there's a certain well, no, I can talk about this in a little bit. We try to like stretch these out so we don't overload all the big ideas at once. But I really like this initially. And this Portia and Fabian and Bianca are trying to go. So right now the spiders exist in sort of a loose social net because they're technically not social animals, which going back to talking about the male thing for a minute, one of the things I always find so interesting personally is like, if dogs were sentient, would world leaders smell each other's butts when they met? Like, you know what I mean? I find it so fascinating, the biology of like how that's different. You know, not everyone is the same. And so the sexism thing I thought was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I would have liked if there had been more variation later on in terms of some males are like, well, yeah, this is my life's purpose. I get to do this. The other important thing to mention is that the DNA, whatever thing, has made it so that spiders can transfer knowledge from one person to the other, like a USB, through sperm packets that the males like leave through like genetic material. And so that's going to become a big part of the book.
Yeah, they're called understandings, which is really nice. I really enjoyed that part, the usage of that as that. But what I wanted, let's see if I can remember now.
You should write down notes while you're going.
I can finish going over to what's happening plot wise, and if you remember, you can jump in.
No, because we got to go through 2 spider.
Yeah, we do.
That's what I was going to do. No,
yeah.
I was gonna go
do you mind if I do
spider.
that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So basically, their whole purpose here, right, is that I remember what I was going to point out. Basically, they're coming from this place. Great Tree is what it will develop into, and it reminds me a ton of the Avatar movie series. Like when it's.
I thought more of the Ewoks.
That too, I guess. But anyway, they're on a mission in order to understand, like, you know, what is out there, what, like they're explorers, which is really cute because that theme continues on in their relationship all the way to space travel, which is really cool, but we'll get there. So they're off. They come into contact with other less evolved spiders, and eventually they end up like getting to a point where they see ants, and the ants are introduced as this force. And it's interesting, it's because the ants are also invertebrates, but they don't function the same way as spiders intelligently. And instead they function like, as you might imagine, ants do, which is based off pheromones, and not quite a hive mind, but more like almost autonomous,
impulses.
Like, yes.
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost like generative AI, which if you understand how the AI works, it's almost like it just keeps doing iterations till it finds the thing that works. And that's, you know, none of the ants themselves are sentient, but they as a whole function as though they are sentient, which is actually a real thing. And it's a real thing that they study with like ants and other large swarms, is like, why does it seem like the swarm has one mind if it doesn't? And it's because a lot of small agents making simple decisions can create complex behaviors. And I loved the ants. The ants are so fucking cool. And what's going to happen to them? Annoyed. But
what, their enslavement? Yeah.
Is it enslavement if they're not sentient? They're still getting to...
Are they not sentient, or do the spiders never discover whether or not?
No.
Yes,
I know. Tells us.
Yes, I know.
Explicitly.
I know.
Then why are you bringing it up?
It's because you never know. Like in this world, like in this own world.
Omniscient narrator.
No!
By the way, Chris M says, at first it's only transferred from one generation to the other. Only later do they discover how to drink the understanding from living spiders.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is also a fascinating concept because it connects to what some research that they've done with elephants, which is the realization that elephants pass memories generationally, not just as like, you know how birds will go to their ancient migration
Breeding
routes.
grounds, yes.
Elephants have breeding grounds, but you can have an elephant who has not been to that place for 5 generations, but they know how to get there. And it's because there is this, the hypothesis is that the elephants are passing down actual memories, and that you will even have like elephants who stop and mourn at a grave for elephants that they did not themselves know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's fascinating. And anyway, so this made me think of that, you know, like that concept of genetically passing on memory to this, into this setting of being able to pass on understandings genetically, which I just think is absolutely super cool. But yeah, and we first learn it from a cool interaction where they meet some other spiders who live in a different place than them, who do things differently, and they barter understanding because they have domesticated aphids
and mice.
To make, because their metabolisms are so much faster now that they need to eat more than they did previously, and so they now have aphids that they milk for sweet nectar, which is
it's honeydew.
It's honeydew.
Yeah. The honeydew, and you know what's interesting is in real life, ants actually farm aphids in natural. Yeah, for the honeydew, which is fun.
And they go
ahead.
on. Will
no, you're actually doing it correctly.
Yeah, they trade off this where they literally get one of their males to give sperm, so that will be able to be used with their females down the line. And so it's this, you get to, the way he does it is he doesn't tell you, you get to watch the scene happen and understand. And this is one of those moments we're talking about, like showing versus telling, because the omniscient narrator is telling you certain things, but you are also getting the fantastic benefit of watching this scene play out. And all the narrator is doing is giving you enough context to be able to put together the scene in a meaningful way. And it works really well because immediately I'm like, I am here for it. I love this concept of understanding. I like that we can barter information. It is
I know.
like a high currency. That's insane. And you can be taught things, and then once you're taught the thing and you have it, you can then pass it on as an understanding. So there's 2 ways to learn. I love it.
I don't understand why that has never been our main currency. Or maybe it has, and I'm just not a historian enough to know that. But.
Well, the thing about it is, it is and it isn't, because it's usually just easier to get people who already know the thing to your society. Like, the thing is, like, we can't actually transfer just information. It's a learned skill, so you just really want the people. But also because knowledge was actually not super important before like the industrial age. But anyway, so they're gonna go off, and they go off, and like they're like, there's something on the edges, and they find this is where they find
whispers of a terrible thing, and we're
and that thing
Clarking it.
And that horrible thing is the ant, or a specific ant colony that's just growing.
Super colony.
And I was like, oh, fuck yeah. I love mindless tyrannid, like the forest from Unbrooded that's just going to grow and grow and grow. And I was like, oh, so cool. And they figure out that the ants at the center of their hive have something they're protecting. So Portia just goes Indiana Jones, like a boss. She infiltrates, she grabs this crystal, and then she swings back out. And like it'll be known for generations as, you know, Portia's heroism.
Stealing the mechanism through which the ants were speaking to God.
Yeah, because the ants, she noticed, are pulsating in a specific rhythm when one of them touches this thing with a metal. Because the ants have discovered metal and smithing and some things, and they touch this crystal. Dwarves. They touch this crystal, and then suddenly all of them are doing a specific. And Portia immediately is like, "Oh, these whatever they're doing, there's a rhythm to it. There is logic here. Whatever that crystal is giving them something. I want that fucking crystal." So as Will says, Indiana Jones it.
She does. It's great.
And she swings out, and thus begins the age of spiderhood. And at every stage of us meeting new spiders, they're getting more nuanced, more educated, more complex in their
technology
society.
Is in advancing. So the next one we get, I think of as like the pre-industrial age. So they have like long web so that they can speak to each other, almost like Telegram, like over different places. They now live in what they call peer groups because they don't value children. This is the thing that I find fascinating, is like, oh, okay, this is how it would work. Like, so they form peer groups instead of like families per se, because they just don't care about their offspring. And this is the city of Great Hive, or Great
Nest. It's Great Nest.
Great Nest. And the ants have continued to expand, and now they're just legion. And it starts with a battle, and I was like, fuck yeah, we're getting a cool battle.
It starts at a place called Seven Trees, which is another city, another big metropolis, but it's not as big as Great Tree or Great whatever. And so we start with Portia again, and she's on the front lines, and she's fighting, and she escapes the Great Fire because now the ants have developed. Go ahead, Will, please say this.
The ants too have become more evolved, so they have like metal shears for teeth. They know to send forward dumb ants first, and like skirmisher ants, and then they have like bombardier beetle type ants that can flame throw, and the spiders, like, they have slings and they have traps, but like they just can't stand up to the ants, the wave of flesh. And I was like, oh, so cool.
And our girl Portia, she goes back to Great Nest, ready to go to her peer group, and be like, wow, shit is. And she goes to temple because around the discovery of that crystal has developed a religious fervor. A message is being beamed down that they can track to a specific celestial object, that when it is in their orbit, they get a message. When they can't see it, they don't get it. So they've tied it specifically to this one celestial thing. And so going, wow, that thing sends down a message that are like religion. And it is the religion of the messenger. And they have the temple, and there's priestesses that dance to the message. And as old Avrana Kern is dealing with the dumb humans out there, which is a thing that I spoke about before, the message changes, and they're like, oh no, is this a foretelling of bad things? What is happening? And our girl Portia is like, oh, life? What are we doing? And she goes and she visits her friend, Bianca. Bianca's a bit of a maverick. She's part of her peer group. They don't see each other a lot. But when Bianca calls, you fucking go. You go visit. And basically, Bianca's like, I think I figured out a way to deal with them. And Portia, who's a warrior, thinks in terms of weapons. Is like, oh, you have a weapon. And Bianca's like, yeah, we could call it that. Like, sure. And basically, she has discovered these specific type of beetles that can go around the ants
with pheromones, so the ants can't see them.
Yes. And previously they used pheromones, like they would kill these beetles to get in without being seen. But now the ants have gotten too smart. They change their pheromones and their signals so rapidly.
So they have a security system,
Yes,
which I think is so fun. Every time we get these biological, later on we'll get this one part too, where because they don't have electricity and stuff like the way we do, they use biological and chemical components to create certain things. So it's super steampunky, and it's
Biopunky?
Yeah, biopunk. Biopunk spider culture is not what I was looking for, but I'm here.
And that's the thing, too, is that they specifically, because they know ants evolve to specific conditions, they will create specific conditions for the ants to actually be useful tools for them. So, like, one of the times later, they're going to mention, like, mining, or in this case, she tried out this thing she's going to try as their weapon on ants that were, like, domesticated, essentially. And so immediately I was like, oh, the ants are like their tech. They're robots. Oh, yes, interesting.
It is such a fascinating way. If you live in a world where computers aren't a thing you have because you don't actively engage with electricity on a day-to-day basis to create this like system, how are you? And the moment you realize that the ants are going to be the living computer brains is just fantastic. But anyway,
it reminds me of that very simple computer they made in Minecraft.
Yes.
Like you can't, through a physical process, you can create a computer. It's just not super efficient.
But anyway, so Bianca's like, I realized that these beetles can not only match whatever signals are being changing, they can get the ants to give them food and take care of them. Whatever these beetles are doing, they can fuck with the ants. And basically, Bianca bioengineered backwards from these beetles a way to kind of take over the hive. And there's this whole cool scene where Portia and a bunch of her people have to go in with these like sacks that are going to spew out this chemical compound that is going to rewire the brains of the ants and make it so that they can then be programmed in a way that like, or worked with in a way that where they're no longer hostile. And it's just this really cool scene because you don't know what Bianca's done. Like at this point, you aren't sure what she's doing, but you know that Portia and all of her, because basically Bianca's like, I need you to get your most badass other females, warriors, and I need you to do something for me with the knowledge that you might not come back. And Portia's like, I gotta find. And it's literally like, it would be like if Vin Diesel grabbed The Rock and that other Jason Statham, like one of those movies. So Portia
getting the gang back together,
gathers all of her hardest girls, and they go in on this. Like they've got, this is their one chance to save society, and and it's just this great scene. And basically
it's also terrifying because the colony is made up of living ant bodies, so they're literally scuttling around tunnel systems.
Made of ants.
I picture almost like organs, like the esophagus or like the lining of an intestine, but like made of ants. And so it's like contracting and moving and all this stuff. And so at any given moment, and there's this one part too, where you get a little bit of foreshadowing as well for what might happen to a human later. But one of the spider warrior ladies ends up getting caught, and the way she dies is horrific.
Yeah.
Well, the way insects fight is they like delimb each other, essentially. Well, they basically sever each other limb by limb, and then body and thorax.
Also borrowed into her. If you remember, they took her, she loses a leg, and then they just start burrowing into her body. Terrifying. It is going to come up later and be as terrible as you expect. But anyway, the thing goes off, and suddenly, like, in one foul swoop, Bianca, with the help of Portia and the muscly ladies, take out the ant colony as a threat, but have not destroyed them. The ants then are programmed to continue doing things that, like, as far as them on a day-to-day basis, their lives haven't changed. They just aren't, like, spreading over to the planet until the point there's no resources, because that's the other thing that you realize is going to happen to the ants is it's basically like somebody had a program and they just hit the button for, you know,
respawn
and explore, but they didn't put a when to stop button, because eventually they're just going to, the idea you get is they're just going to take over everything to the point where they're going, like, they almost feel like the humans of this. Like,
yes,
I don't want to say
they
that,
do,
but,
don't they?
But when you think of humanity as this thing that is
a virus
and incapable of regulating its own consumption, because that's how the ants feel. They feel like a massive
vacuum
thing that cannot regulate its own consumption. And basically, the ants get to live as they are want to do, but with regulation. The spiders just basically come in as a regulating hand, and it gets dealt up, and you're like, wow, what a neat bow.
No, I was like, fuck the spiders. I'm on the side of the ants. The ants should have won. They're so cool. The spiders a bunch of sexists anyway. I don't. And also, I just really liked the ants as like this implacable eldritch foe, because that is the kind of shit I like.
You love your implacable eldritch foes, William.
So during this time, this is where we finally align a little bit. During this time on the human side of things, may I continue?
Yes.
Hold on. Nemarella says Grey Goo scenario with ants. Yeah, that's the word that's the term I was thinking of. I was like, is it a nano swarm? But no, it's the Grey Goo problem.
Yeah.
So during this time, right? Poor Mason.
My boy.
Sorry. Remind me his last name. I'm thinking of his first name.
His first name is Halston. His last name is Mason.
Mason. That's what it is. Okay, thanks. So Mason unfortunately gets yoinked out of his sleeping arrangements, and lo and behold, we've got a bit of a civil war going on the Gilgamesh, which is their ship, and this civil war has to do with remind me, actually, you know what? Okay. I'm not as good. I'm not recalling as well.
In the last thing we get with the humans, basically they realize they can't go down on Kern's world. They sent down a drone, and Kern's the satellite near the little hub nearly, like, it blew up the drones. It completely took over their computer systems. Like, Evrana Kern was in their entire ship, controlling everything, and basically was like, you don't get to go here. They end up getting one drone down to the surface of the planet, and it is immediately taken down by a dark spider form that just quamps, and they're like, oh, there be monsters there. Evrana gave us a different planet we can go to. We'll try go to a different planet and look there. But before we do that, we're going to set up a colony on this moon, because we want to give humans, and this is Guyen. Guyen is the kind of captain, commander of this Ark ship, and Guyen's like, we need to give humanity the best chance. We have like terraforming not even terraforming projects, but they have a technology that should set up a little biodome for them that they can then, like, begin colonizing this moon in this system. Halston goes to sleep. That's the plan. He wakes up. War. He's woken up by some people who are want to use him as a hostage, but also use him for a specific purpose. And what happened is when they decided they were going to colonize the planet, they woke up some people ahead of time and told them, this is what's going to happen. We're going to shoot you down to that place. And they're like, no, I don't want to go. That is a frozen ice planet. And because the fear here is the passing of time, which people on the ship do not have to deal with. They get to go to sleep in their little stasis pods. 100 years can go by and they come out and they're still them. Everyone who's going down to this planet does not have that. They have to live in a godforsaken icebox. And to the point where Halston himself is so terrified of this that he wakes up screaming, I don't want to go, don't make me go, don't, and which the rebels think is hysterical. But basically, the people that were told you have to go down went, nope, not
No
going to do
thanks.
that. And they get guns and they start a rebellion. So it's Guyen and the people on the ship versus the people that are supposed to go down to colonize the planet. And they have Lane, the head engineer, and now they have Halston, and they're partially using them as hostages, but also they've decided that Halston is their best bet to negotiate with Avrana Kern to try get down to the planet, because their plan is hell high water, they're going down to the planet. There's some tussling, they get into a little pod, they eject off. Guyen sends some people after them, and they end up making it to the planet. They crash land, and they get there, and a couple of people go outside to figure out what's going on.
One poor lady goes outside to take a look at things, and oh my god, an ant gets into her suit, and they're like, oh, we hear her screaming, oh no, what's happening? And they run outside, and they're like, you know what, it's fine, we're stuck here anyway, we're either gonna die now or we're gonna die later, let's go see what's going on. And they go outside, and like, ants. If I'm not forgetting, her leg is like chopped off.
Yeah,
and
there are ants.
There's like a couple of ants here and there, and then they take her helmet off, and an ant comes out of her, and there's blood and my gosh, it's
burrowed
great.
through her body. It's awesome. And the ants are coming in, and they can snip because they have those metal jaws, and then one of them is like a fucking flamethrower, and the humans are like, oh shit. It's a great action scene. Again, the author is really talented when it comes to these kinds of scenes. There's not a lot of them in the book, but when he punches hard.
He really does. It is wild. And then another shuttle is coming down after them, and it is the security shuttle from the ship that is here to get. And so Halston and Lane are like, "Oh, thank God. We can try to go back now." And they shoot all of the. Or no, there is a moment where they're kind of like the ants are gone. Because then Bianca's whole thing has happened, and they look, and there is a giant spider, and like giant in the sense that like a meter long, like dog size spider.
Have you ever seen like spider or coconut crabs? I kind of thought of that.
Yeah.
Fucking horrific.
Yeah, they are.
And it's there and staring at them, and Halston looks at it and is like, is that intelligence behind its eyes? But then they shoot it, and
of course.
Yeah, and then the rescue team comes down, and they grab them, and then they get Lane, they get Halston, and then Karst, who's the security guy, is like, we're killing everybody else. No, we're not taking any hostages. Pew, 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 pew. But then one lady runs off into the trees and manages to escape. And basically, Kern agreed to let Guyen's security shuttle down as long as they promised to either kill or get everyone off the planet so it didn't fuck up her experiment. He basically lets her know that like that person ran off. It would cause more harm for us to go and try to get her than to just let her die, eaten by the monsters there. And so they let that happen, and this human becomes the first human the spider babies ever see, and they're like, what a dumb creature. Yeah. Wow. The messenger sent this thing to show appreciation for our win here, because like basically they win against the ants, thing crashes down from the planet, and they were like, she must have manned it with a shitty creature she doesn't even care that much about, that's not that smart, because they can't really hear. They can feel the vibrations of speak to a point, but they can't really. So as far as they know, this
they communicate through like leg tapping on like spider things, and then there's also a secondary language of their little like, what are they called? Blobs.
They're
palps. And eventually the human learns how to kind of mimic it, but she can't really do it very well.
Yeah, she starts using her hands like legs a little bit, but only.
I feel so bad.
Yeah.
For her.
This is another one of those trapped in horrific and dying alone moments that this book has a lot of.
She was kept as a penned animal and barely, I'm sure, had horrible things to eat. And as far as, insects,
she had mice.
Oh boy.
She had mice.
Oh boy. And
I'm sure she couldn't cook them.
Yes, and being surrounded, but I do think it's really fascinating, though, is that she did attempt communication because she realized there is communication happening. But yeah, and then she dies of old age, I'm assuming, or whatever.
Yeah, or I mean, it could be like parasites. She's been eating raw other mammals. You know, there's a whole host of things could have taken her up. But anyway, they realize she can do basic words, so she can signal for food and that kind of stuff. But they're like, okay, so she's not the rock, but she's not that smart. She's like the jumping spiders, like that level of intelligence. And she dies, and they dissect her and look at her, and they were like, basically, biologically, no different from a mouse. I think we're done here. And they're like, they societally just move on. Like, you don't hear about this until much later when they realize, oh wait, we have records of this later, but they just like move the fuck on. That is how inconsequential this was. Outside of the only thing that is consequential is the idea that the messenger sent down a thing in approval of what they did. This, of course, religious fervor gets even higher for the spiders. But hark, what is that? A plague. A plague. A terrible, and not COVID. No.
Black Death style.
Worse than Black Death, because they're so, at this point, they're so crammed into their social peer groups and stuff that infections just go. One thing I can say about nuclear families is schools and work points are easy ways to contract stuff, but it's like if you're just in a house, that's a small like way to get. They're just, the peer houses are just because it's basically the clutch of eggs you birthed from. That generally becomes your peer house. You can then develop ones that are like, you decide to become an academic, so you develop an academic peer house. But especially at this stage, it's still very much who you were born into the world with. That have to remain your friends. Some people get cast off.
Can I just say, I love the seedy nature of this freaking spider city. Prior to the I mean, it's so sci-fi. So
the lower reaches.
Yes.
Oh.
So
It's like a hive city.
Yes, their city is made vertically, right? Which makes sense. And so it sprawls upwards. And so on different levels, there are different things. I don't know if this comes up yet, but in general, the more upper class spiders are actually in the mid-range of trees. It's because they're not open to the elements of towards the top of the tree line, but they're not towards the bottom, where all the seedy stuff happens and where the barbaric stuff happens, and where all the small males that have not donors. What's the word?
Mate.
Patrons.
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 Thank you. That do not have a female patron. Just rip after scraps and kill each other, and it's like, I just imagine like the Colosseum vibe on the first floor.
It's a rough world, and we're at a stage where we have a city. It is functioning as a city. We have kind of a bit of an anarchical syndicalism happening, where there are roles in society, but there's no one governing body. The temple has a lot of sway, but is still a separate thing, and there is a high priestess. But men within society are very ornamental or do very rudimentary work.
Males within society, not men.
Have a very rudimentary position, and like they do dances, and like we eat men less now. You can still do
it's in bad taste.
Yes,
but
it's in bad taste. And it's only appropriate if it was after mating, or if the male did something really bad and we have to punish him.
I do like the idea of just like one giant female like lady lord spider, and a whole bunch of attendants just dancing. Yeah,
that's literally what it is. She was like women of high status, or the lady spiders of high status, would have like a little army of men,
of concubinal men, boys
for them.
The ants should have won. The ants should have won.
Anyway, and then in this world, like in this setting, our lead Portia is not just like, because our last one, she was warrior Portia. This one is scientist Portia, but more than that, she is high priestess Portia. She is like top of the food chain. This plague, huge problem, starting lots of issues. Entire cities are going down, and there's a big thing happening. And they're she has to figure out like what they're gonna do, and they've been yes. So she goes to one of her friends because she's trying to find a cure, and she ends up going to, or one of her friends comes to see her, but her friend is also very smart. And her friend is like, listen, the world's ending. I'd like to send a message to the messenger. And everybody's like, no, we do not deign to interact. We merely receive her messages and we pray and we commune, but we never reply back.
Sorry, I hit it by accident.
Yeah. It is a great heresy to even consider, because popping up all over are people like, she gave us questions. Can we not answer it? Like logical steps, people. And because the spiders are inherently inquisitive and seek answers. And so the extra inquisitive spiders are coming to these conclusions. And our girl Portia is like, no, Bianca, we're not doing this. The world. And then she's like, but will you help me find a cure? And Bianca's like, sure, maybe. And then Portia's like, maybe if things work out, I'll let you send a message. And basically, they discovered DNA. They call it hidden books.
And not just that,
fascinating.
But the description of what they perceive DNA to be is such a creative and fun listen / I'm sure read. Just the description is so fun. It is so good. It's good writing. They're hidden books within each spider that they cannot read or understand, but they can compare, and they can see that like a child spider's hidden book matches its parents' hidden book in certain ways. And because what has happened is in the cities that have been devastated by the plagues, there are still some spiders who survive, but they have defaulted to the barbaric activities of their ancestors. But our girl Portia sent one of her males that she trusts into one of the cities, a group of males, into one of the devastated cities to bring back spiderlings born into the devastation, which means inherently they're immune. And she's trying to figure out how to get advantage of their immunity. She has a friend named Viola, who has also been looking into this kind of thing, has begun to try read the work. And to cut a very long story short, they basically discover that they can share biological, because they basically look at the ability to be immune to the plague as a biological understanding. And they're like, how can we share this biological understanding? Viola has discovered the nanovirus. In looking at the DNA, there is something there in each and every spider, this divine gift that they're like, oh my God, is this from the messenger? What is this? But it's this thing that is in every spider that is subtly working on and helping their DNA. And they were like, if we can get this virus and get the code from the immune spiderlings, can we create a cure? And they basically create a kind of nano antidote. A new understanding
that they can then share through injection with other spiders that gives them this biological understanding. And it works, not in time to save old Viola. She doesn't have time.
Sad.
But Bianca,
I know.
It is sad. It was a sad moment.
Yeah.
I want to mention something too.
Viola!
I want to mention something too. I thought it was really fun, and I did like the development because it's happening in the background slowly but surely until we get to a final head for it. But meanwhile, while this plague is happening, a lot of the roles, I liked the parallel to World War II / and I really liked how as all the females were dying or running away because they don't want to get sick, the males inherited the previously female roles and showed that they were quite capable in doing equally as much as the females were as well.
We are at the start of male spider liberation, baby. It starts here.
Okay, so this part and a little bit of the next one is where I started to get a little bit annoyed with the world building of the spiders, because it's all very cool, but the thing is, the spiders are a monolith, and in a way that doesn't super make sense in certain ways.
Yeah, I know.
So, like, for example, it would have been, people across society have across the world have different ideas. So maybe it would have been interesting if there was like one of the things that's mentioned is that one of the reasons that the Bianca from the previous age kept a male assistant, which was like, is because it's not constantly trying to fight for status with her. So like it would have been interesting if there had been a spider colony that was mostly run by males because they were better at cooperation or something like that. Or there was a male cult that was like, no, our job is to die after mating. This is a thing that's really cool. We're not an underclass. This is our job. Or it also doesn't technically make a lot of sense males are that depreciated for being smaller because the female spiders, their size, they don't actually fight that much. So it's not like in like humanity where if you were like twice the size, it would be really useful because you're going to war all the time. They're just as intelligent. So if anything, so that's like one of the things that's like, okay, I get the author wants to do a sexism thing, but like, and also there's less like human issues. Everybody's a little kumbaya with each other, and there's not quite as much conflict as I would have liked.
I thought we were gonna, because we start getting that a little bit with because we're about to enter the stage where there is conflict and the spiders are having a war within themselves. And because I did get the feeling that there were places where things were like where there were more males, like the cities that had been more devastated had begun to kind of split off culturally a bit in some of their understandings. But I do agree. I wish there had been more. And I get it because for the purposes of this book to do that, this would have just had to have been a book about spiders. Like,
yes,
we would have had to lose the humans.
I think you could have had a little bit of signaling towards other cities being different than great.
Well, see, I think where it goes wrong maybe not goes wrong. I think where it gives you a hint at it, but then it doesn't expand on it, so it feels like a missing piece, is that the cephalopods or whatever that are underwater, I don't remember what it is. The spiders actually interact with them, another invertebrate species. And the thing is if those guys have become smart enough for exchanging understandings and like stuff like that and everything, and they even have like, they don't speak, the same way the spiders do, so they can't really have long conversations, but they still are able to speak in mathematics and stuff like that. It mentions that explicitly several times throughout the different generations that happen with the spider. So the question then becomes well, where are the praying mantises? Like, do the praying mantises not have, like, really, like, are they not, like, super cool assassins with, like...
We don't know if praying mantises were brought to the planet.
But the thing is we have to assume that there could have been other things. Why were the spiders put there then? So the point is structurally speaking, it is simpler not to address that question. And perhaps there are no predators above that spider in this particular part of this world, which I think can be more believable in this moment rather than, because we don't have to have it all explained to us. So I wonder almost if the sequel and in the next book after that, if it addresses any of those things.
Yeah, I'm curious, but it just, in general, this is going to lead, this wasn't such a massive problem because I was like, okay, the author's doing their thing, but this is going to lead to my my problems with how the book ends with the spiders.
Yes. And I had the opposite problem is I felt like the spiders felt distinct enough and had their own problems within themselves that made the ending feel a little too clean for me. In that regard. But so when we start this next one, our girl...
We should address the humans.
Yeah.
We should. Okay, the humans are going off. They find this new planet. They can't land on it, though, because it's been completely covered by spores, which is very cool. And they start looting some old Empire tech from the stations and making the Gilgamesh stronger. And they find a mind cradle and Guillemot. I forget what the main...
Guyen. His name's Guyen.
Guyen is like, oh, maybe I could up my brain. That would be
Digimon.
cool.
Guillemon.
And
Digimon.
Wallstein the whole time is like, old Empire sucks. What if we hadn't just kept trying? What if we hadn't followed in their footsteps and learned things for our own selves? And I'm like, okay, shut up. Have a little respect for your elders.
Oh my God, no! Exact opposite reaction for me. Also, as a side note, this planet also sounds horrific. this gray planet that they've discovered, because they explain how they sent drones down and even the drones became infected with spores. And all I could think about was, oh my God, how awful would that be to explore that planet? That would be horrific. During this time as well, what happens is that Lane is sent over to the other, the place where they're gutting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The station they're gutting and taking the technology from and stuff. And meanwhile, Mason is being tasked to basically read the files and translate and such, everything about the, as Will said, the cradle, or the mind scanner / translator into being AI, not human. And she invites him over
and says she needs his help on something.
Yes, and she has a whole dinner set up, which I thought was very romantic on her part.
She doesn't meet him. She has people bring him there. He comes in. She's got a ton of food. She's sitting there, and he's like, "Well, what do we got to work on?" And she's like, She's like, no, this is not for work, you silly fool. But then again, also, like, she also didn't just say, hey, meet me at my place. I mean, I guess, again, it's space. So anyway, the point is, though, is they have a very romantic dinner, and there's no, like, real flirting or anything. When I say romantic, I mean just it's romantic for the two of them.
Yes.
Even these two characters, it's their romance.
And they make and as Chris M said, yes, it is a perfect opportunity for fanfic. But anyway, they make sweet love, and in front of the star, as she says later, very romantically, which is a little out of character for her, which is, again, that gooey center that we get to see every now and again. She's like, and we made love in front of the star system, because there's like a really big window that she reveals to him in the station.
The Gilgamesh, their ship does not have windows, so they're like never really interacting, and
with the outside,
this station had windows. And it's just this cute scene. And you're like, I immediately was like, oh, Lane wants some nookie. She wants a human interaction, and she
has had, as he says later, a torch held for him since the beginning. The fact that she even elicits him from the get-go, I'm like, oh God, there's a romance for the ages.
This scratched my hot and bitchy, like,
it does.
bitch a little bit.
She gives it. She's not necessarily hot.
Does she?
Is she bitchy? It's also just it's funny because one of the things that is happening every time he's woken up is he's the oldest person on the crew originally, and through people waking up and living longer than him, people are catching up to him. And so at this point, Lane and him are basically the same age, but she continues to call him old man. So they do that. He goes back to sleep. He helped Guyen figure out how to do this thing. They're going to continue working on stuff. He goes back to sleep. He wakes up. It is Mad Max. It is Mad Max on the spaceship.
Oh my God, no. You know what it reminded me of? And I hated it because it made me so depressed. It reminded me of Mother.
Oh. Yeah.
It reminded me of Mother
movie.
So... Wait, did you say you hate that movie?
No, I said that movie.
That movie.
Oh, yeah. If you don't know Mother, I think it's a really good film. But anyway, but that being said, Maria's not wrong. We've got, like, people that have ripped up tech that they just have melded blades on, like cavemen.
It's very kind of, if you've ever watched the movie, it's not called Psychosis. I forget what it's called. Anyway, there's a movie where on an art ship like this that happens. And it's really cool, but you're also like, wow, this is different. And basically what you find out is that Guyen?
He's not a Digimon.
I don't know how you keep adding more syllables.
Guyen, it's with a Warhammer. Guyen wants to upload himself to the machine, but it's taking a long time, and so he keeps having to take people out of storage.
Specifically to the ship. He wants to upload himself into the ship.
Right, so he can continue, he can, create his great work. And so, he couldn't keep putting people back to sleep when he went to sleep, so they had, like, their descendants, and, like, their descendants kind of treat him like a god, and he kind of, cultivates that. And then Lane the whole time has been like now leading a resistance against him, but she can't like really manage it because there's not quite enough people, and the ship, she says, is just falling apart, and like he's going to destroy everyone, and there's like ghosts of him in the computer, which is really cool, and him and Lane, like, they try to forge an alliance with two of the other people that the team members, I forget the leadership team.
It's what?
The leadership team, the key crew, and basically, that doesn't work, and so he gets captured and taken to Guyen, and Guyen's like, "No, I'm not a megalomaniac, crazy person. I just want this to work. I'm actually outfitting the ship with better guns and armor so that we can take on Kern when we go back, because that's the only green world left, really. Like, we don't have another option here. But we see a little glint of madness in him." In that he it's like, oh, those people, they died, they didn't matter.
And not just that they didn't matter. He calls the people, because eventually they did colonize that moon colony, and they all die. One of the things you find out from Lane, they all died. Just complete death. And even though none of those people were the original rebellion people, he talks about them as if they were traitors and they deserve to die. So that lets our boy Halston know, oh no, him's fucked up. No good.
Yeah. And so there's like a fight where Lane kind of fights him at the last minute as he's trying to be uploaded. And this is the part of the book where I started to get really annoyed with Halston. Because, like, I liked Halston early on, but he's real fucking useless in this book. He actually does nothing of worth. He's just there to watch other people do stuff and maybe translate a few things here and there. And I thought at this moment, I was like, oh, what if maybe at the last minute he's dying and he gets uploaded into the computer? I was like, oh, that would be so interesting, because all of a sudden he would have all this power and it would be a really interesting contrast with Kern, these two kind of AI human things. No, he's going to continue to do nothing throughout this book.
Yes. So this is one of the book's problems. So I like Halston all the way through, subjectively, but objectively, this character has no agency. He doesn't really do anything. He is taken, and there's literally a point later in the book where he's like, I'm so tired of people telling me they're going to take me somewhere to talk to a different person. I'm very frustrated, but like, it never results in him doing a thing that impacts. So like, even in the final confrontation, you think there's going to be a moment where he goes, no guys, we can't do this. Through watching and thinking about, hey, we shouldn't be emulating the old empire, which I don't mind. I don't mind looking at the old empire and going, maybe we shouldn't be emulating the people that fucked up the planet.
Whoa. Humanity was doing the best it could. It was really those Green New Deal liberals who screwed things up.
The word empire.
He really does. He is... This is his Warhammer really coming to shine. We love the Empire.
But also, honest, I do want to just like chime in on that. Yeah, no, that is the one thing I thought during this specific time, this iteration of his experience on the ship, I thought there was going to be a lot more of him doing something or making that whole, again, it's so funny. It's because it almost feels preconceived that it would happen here, that he has been saying this whole time, people just keep unfreezing me. It's because they just need things translated. I'm so useless. Well, here's the time to do it. Here, you can literally do exactly what you just did, what you just said.
He could have been the person to kill Guyen. He could have been like, no, don't do something. There was so many points where he could have, because otherwise I go, why wasn't Lane our POV character for this ship? You could have still had her and Halston, but just had Halston as the person that was the secondary character, but at least then we would have been in the point of view of someone who has agency and does stuff. Because again, subjectively, I loved it. I don't care. I loved Halston every way through. I loved my observant little boy. But objectively, no, we could have had better. We could have done better. Like, and just because I did enjoy it, and at the time of reading, I wasn't like, oh, it doesn't stop me from being able to go, no, that is a weak point. He was so passive.
Also, wouldn't it have been great for him to bring up before now, certainly, but maybe even during the time, I don't know, just like in some way utilize also his knowledge of the fact of how deranged Kern was, due to her upload and her lack of sense of self and stuff, and how maybe he could have literally used his knowledge from that to persuade Guyon to understand that, hey, you might lose the plot and forget that this is what you're wanting. So how can you trust that this version of yourself? Anyway, so yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. And again, it just keeps happening, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, it's basically, I'm going to highlight 2 comments. Miss Allie Snowsnuds, he gets woken up, witnesses something, gets kidnapped, and gets put back in the freezer. Additionally, Chris M. brings up the point, it felt like the author wanted to avoid all the technical aspects, so he picked the least science guy as the POV. And it does kind of, like, feel that. I don't want to say that is the thing, but there is a vibe that you get from it. Lindbergh has just said Halston felt like a POV that was only there to spy on the humans. Even the bots where he does things have distant passivity to how they're told, which is a missed opportunity. And he really overall is just a missed opportunity because the revelation he is slowly coming across, because he goes from being someone who really idolized the old empire as a classicist to looking at this and going, no, guys, because while he's saying, no, guys, we needed to have forged our own way, that's exactly what the spiders are doing. They are forging technology. They're getting to certain milestones completely on their own from completely different bases of understanding. And so you get this nice thing. And so it would have been so great if he, on his own, before what is going to happens, goes, guys, let's try something different. And because I thought that's what his thing was. I thought that was going to be Halston's entire shit. He was going to figure out the thing and, number one, show that humanity could figure out. Because there's this thing that happens where on an individual basis, humanity is really cool and capable of great acts of generosity and culture, kindness, and a lot of things like that. But culturally, as a monolith, where we are very us against them, whether us is humans versus other things, whether it's us against other humans, and just a little problematic, if you will.
Well, I would like to. No, you go ahead first.
I'd like to bring up something thematically as well. So we haven't really quite gotten to this, although Maria alluded to it, which is the fact that once communication happens with Kern's satellite, I'm just jumping just a little bit just to explain this part, but we'll get to it, but there starts to be almost a pollution of spider culture because she's asking them to do something. And so anyway, there becomes a schism. And so that really starts representing that concept that human nature, which is what she later on tells the spiders, but she says, but human nature is inherently wanting to conquer or to enslave or to whatever, whereas spider culture is more, and it literally says this exposition wise, is more along the lines of let's adapt, let's interchange, let's exchange, well, just to finish my point. I'm about
to rant so much. I was going to wait till the end of the book.
Yeah.
Which ruins the theme at the end of this, which is why the ending of this novel, I feel, sends a weirdly mixed message, considering that theme is reinforced frequently, and yet at the end happens the way it does.
I'm gonna save what I was gonna say till the end because it is kind of important to know some of the plot things. But yeah, one of my least favorite tropes is humans suck, aliens are great, especially my Mary Sue aliens. Ugh. Did you have anything to say, Maria, before we move to the next plot point?
Yes. So actually, no, I'll save it for when we talk about that, because I do think there is this connected to this idea. I think. And it'll make more sense later, so I'm not going to bring it up now. But anyway,
back to the spiders. So basically, Halston goes back into cryogenic sleep. Lane's going to be around to fix things for a little bit, but then is going to go to sleep, or is she? Now, back with the spiders. This is the same Portia and I was going to say Caspian and Fabian who fixed the plague problem, and now she is like a little bit more smart.
No, different. It's
different.
No. Yes, this Bianca. No. Her Bianca, the Portia and the previous Fabian, her Bianca was fucked up by the plague. This Bianca is smart, happening, and no twitchies. They are different.
But why does she still like Fabian's? I could have sworn they mentioned that.
It's a different Fabian. The previous Portia did not respect, because the previous Portia, her Fabian came into her city. She came into her peer group. She worked with him. This one, she keeps him hidden. She really likes him. He's really smart, and she lets him do work.
It does not explicitly show this very well, though.
But it is. It's completely different.
Okay.
Because so we've got a new Portia. She's in a really
just real quick, interrupt you. That actually was a point of confusion for me while I was listening to it. It's because I was like, is this a new one? It seems like a new one, but it also at the same time seems to echo what previously happened. Because the thing is it mentions Viola, it didn't make it. It mentions that Bianca still has the twitches, yes. But
it's not this. That ends at the previous one. When we come back to this, it's a completely different cast.
Well, so basically the problem is all their relationships mirrored the ones that they had in the previous generation. Yeah. So to me, it was confusing. I was like, and Bianca's still like a heretic, and renegade. Fabian is still someone who she finds useful, but kind of has the hots for, but kind of doesn't.
Something we didn't mention at the end of the last thing before we started talking about the humans, but after they fix the plague and they do all of that stuff, Portia is like, okay, Bianca, I know you have fits of epilepsy now, but you can send your message to space.
Oh, that's right. That's where that exchange happens, and then you have the cut.
Yes, and then it cuts and we move on. So she sends her thing. So she sends the answer, and then we get a thing for Kern. Kern gets the response and is like, responds them and is like, "Hi, it's me. I'm your god." And so then we enter a different stage where we've been talking back and forth for God. This is another reason why it's a different set of people. That they've been talking to God for a very long time at this point and going through, but they're struggling. There's this sense that what God is saying and what they are able to do, because God wants them to do things. And sometimes when they talk to God, God doesn't understand them, and what God is telling them to do, they don't understand, because Avrana is working from the idea that they are working from a more human or mammalian set of understanding, and they have a completely different way and basis for technology. And
so,
culture.
like, one example is that the way they send information is circular out like a spider web, and she's just confused that it's not like sequential, it's that it's spiral, for example.
Yeah. But this Portia is powerful. She's kind of like head of the city, but in a not in like one specific way. And she specifically is a different head priestess, but she is just molted. She's had her big molting, and she's been out of things for a while, for a month, and they bring her a male who has been getting all of the memos, going to all the meetings, all of the stuff, and he basically gives her his month of understandings, and she drinks it from him, and he gets killed because now he literally knows too much that she needed to know. But she kind of like starts her work, and she's a scientist, she's a thing, and this is, I will agree, it is very similar to the previous Portia. Mm-hmm. I think they should have changed it and made this Portia named Bianca, just so you have the sense that it is a different timeline. Mm-hmm. I got it, but I completely understand why it is very confusing. Mm-hmm. But anyway, but this Portia, on top of all of her stuff, she has a secret that she doesn't want anyone to know about. She has a boy toy, Fabian, who is super duper extra smartest boy in school, that she keeps away because she lets him do work
that only females should do.
And because now men have gotten into, or male spiders have gotten into science, but they generally always have a female overseer, but not Fabian. Fabian is such smartest, goodest boy. He gets to work all by himself, and he has his own crew of males that he works with. And Fabian is a male rights activist at heart, on top of being hecking smart. And basically they have a discussion where he's working on something, and they're trying to make a breakthrough in their understanding so that they can do what the messenger is asking them to do. And there is now a new schism where there are those of the spiders that say, I don't actually think the messenger is a god. I just think it is a presence out there that we are communicating in. And I don't think we need to treat it like a deity, and we can also do our own thing. And then there's the temple that's like, no, God's word is law. We must work towards it. And so she wants Fabian to kind of make a breakthrough. And he's like, so actually, I I did make a really cool breakthrough.
And she gets so hot and bothered. She's like, we must mate immediately so we can pass on this understanding. But it also has the tone of a woman who's just really turned on. It's because she also mentions he danced for her once. And they exchanged. And you can tell that she, like, as much as she can in this iteration.
And bitchy.
Yes,
this is the
indeed.
hot and bitchy because she's got the power, and Fabian's like, so I don't like that the only reason I'm safe, protected, and have all of the things I have is because people don't want to make you angry. Because there's a point where he's like, he eventually goes and he does something dangerous. He goes into the lower reaches of the city, and she's like, oh my god. Can you imagine? Nobody has your understandings. You have not passed them down. Do you understand what? And so she's mad for herself because she likes Fabian, but she's also mad. And he's like, listen, my discovery is so important. It can make it so we can do all that the messenger has asked from us. I can basically take the ants from a very simple computer and make them a supercomputer that I can program on the fly very quickly through biochemical stuff. And she's like, oh my god, this is amazing. And he's like, yeah, but I am not going to give it to you unless you're one of the most important females in Great Nest. I am not giving it to you unless you make it so that killing males is illegal. Same as killing females. Because one of the things you learn here is that killing females is so not allowed. They don't even kill people they consider as heretics. You just get labeled with a thing that'll make the ants kill you, and you're exiled, so you have to live on your own. And we're introduced to one of those, our Bianca for this world. She's one of those heretics that is like, I don't think that the messenger is a god. I think the messenger is just a regular old schmegular. Like, I think they are not all-knowing. I think they are limited on what they can see and understand, and basically that makes her a heretic. So she's been put in this one colony, and she is one of her peer group, and so Portia doesn't want to kill her.
Yes, I would like to. Can I take a moment for a sec before you continue? So this is around the same time where Guyon is actually trying to upload himself. Is when we get this story, and this is the tonal shift I spoke of before, where we start getting a little bit more into emotional sides of things and a little bit almost more in the case of the body horror of Guyon uploading himself and like the barbaric humans on the ship and everything. The tone kind of shifts a little bit. It's more, I don't want to call it emotional, but it's more invested, I guess, in that moment. And the tonal shift as well for the spiders, because this is the evolution where they're starting to actually develop the ability to have affection. As we know it to be, because Fabian obviously in these moments is characterized by affection, but also derision towards Portia. And also I also liked that, and this is what brought it up, reminded me I wanted to say this, because it hit me in the moment when it describes Bianca in the cell that she's in or whatever, as a prisoner. She has her, like, pattern dyed different colors, and it's to like show, and it's like basically just to like, it's how like modern and like cool she is. And I'm just like, if we have fashion like that, that's also more recognizable. So that comboed with the obvious like acknowledgement of the sexism from Fabian's side and everything, I just felt like it in a way it was fun, but it also took me a little bit, it was almost too recognizable in some ways, and it made me feel like I was getting too much human in some of the spider stuff. But that's neither here nor there. Go ahead.
So there's a question here of, are these things
I know,
markers of certain levels of intelligence, that this is just going to happen? But we don't know, because we've never met another
how much of it is covert evolution and how much of it is inherent to being a human.
Exactly. But anyway, Bianca won't give up her heretical ways, and Fabian is being a sassy boy, and basically he's like, I will not give it to you unless you put laws into place protecting men or the males, and making it so that we can do anything that a female, and we can have our own peer houses, because males cannot have their own peer houses. They can be parts of others, but and the pier houses are generally coded as female, with like some males that get to come in and get advantage of them. And they want to be able to have their own pier houses. So this is basically male suffrage. And
essentially.
Fabian's like, if Portia, because he likes Portia quite a bit, but if Portia won't listen to him, he's going to take his knowledge and he's going to fuck off. So him and Bianca fuck off together, because he has already done the supercomputering of the ants. He's already started that process. Portia doesn't realize it, but he's able to like program them really quick. And he's like
ant hacker.
Yeah, he is an ant. He's an ant hacker. That's exactly what he is. And they go to Seven Trees, because Seven Trees is one of those places that got really decimated. So male spiders started taking on more
traditionally female roles.
And they've kept them since then. So he goes there, and even them at first that are like, they're balking. But what is also happening is there's a fight for resources, because as the messenger is giving things, she's not talking directly just to them as one monolith of spiders. She's talking to each of the cities separately, and they're getting different messages that are also translating them differently. So it becomes this schism point of culture where they are working not together, but to get to their own advancements to talk with the messenger, which has caused a resource crisis for mining metals. And there are some mines close to Seven Trees that Great Nest has attacked and invaded. And so the army of Great Nest has come, and Fabian's like, don't worry, give me like 100 ants. A couple hundred. I can take them down. And he basically single-handedly takes down the Great Nest to the point where the Great Nest has to bargain. And eventually they realize that Portia was taken down from a position of power. Nobody knows where she is. But there were other dissenters within Great Nest that wanted to go in a different direction, that also were heretical in the sense of they didn't want to be slaves to the messenger anymore. And they have now taken over Great Nest at the threat of Fabian's army, which he still had to be under Viola. This is a different Viola. He still has to have her. Yes,
was
Viola.
It was
Bianca's still back at Seven Nest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking
Trees.
about. Yes.
Yeah.
And just as an aside, while he was developing himself and finding a place for himself, once he and Bianca ran away, he did end up finding 3 starving like sister like spiders and being like, "Yo, if I like help you guys raise in prestige, can you be my pretend patrons or real patrons to some degree, I guess?" And they're like, "Sure." And so he ends up getting his own peer group to some degree of males, which he establishes. So by the time we get to the end of the war, which Maria will get to, he fights for their rights more.
Yeah, and so they get to this point, and after his success, he goes back to Seven Trees, and now that they've won, he knows that they're going to try take back their promises, and he's like, no, I can. And basically, they come to a tacit agreement that yes, they're going to go ahead and let him have his own peer group, and he develops all of his own processes, and he becomes and basically crashes down the matriarchy in.
But then something weird happens. He's found dead, sucked out, a husk,
2 years
murdered.
later. So he's created the social change, but 2 years later, he has been sucked dry of understanding.
Who was it? Was it Portia?
Nobody knows. So it ends with, and nobody ever knew what happened to old Portia, because that Portia just completely disappears.
I don't do you think it was supposed to hint that it was her?
Of course it was Portia. She'd been tracking that bitch for ages. That was her boy toy.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
If there was a HBO movie or series about their life, it would be this toxic love affair between these two, and then it ends with him being sucked dry in Portia, but he also manages to kill Portia in the last moment, and she crawls away, and then they just find his dead body.
Yes.
Having had sex one last time. So we're going to have to kind of rush through it because we hit 2 hours and 10 minutes. Okay, so basically, men's rights are going. We finished basically with that. Then we're back to the ship. We find that this whole time, Lane has not been able to go to sleep next time Halston wakes up. And it's now kind of a generation ship with families living on there. And trying to maintain the ship, even as it's beginning to fall apart. And he goes to see Lane, and she's very old. And basically, she's like, yeah, this is kind of it for me. I'm not going to be able to go to sleep. I haven't been able to quite get the ship running. And there's an extremely poignant, like, they know this is the last time they're going to see each other. She is going to die while he is in rest, whatever space. And one of the things is that the ship has been, every time somebody gets pregnant, if there's not enough space for them, they just put the embryo in stasis. And she goes and shows him the embryo in stasis that they made last time they were having the sex. And so it's like, this is their child.
Wasn't that great, though? Can I just pause for 5 seconds and just say, oh my God, what a great motivating force. Because at this point, there seems such a lack, because he has a lack of motivation. He's like, what else is there? There's nothing. And great. That's a great job. A great motivator.
She basically says to him, I need you to go to sleep, because he's like, I want to stay here. Let's get old together. And she's like, no, I need you to go to sleep, because whatever happens, I need you to make sure you're looking out. I'm giving you a reason to work. Now, I will say I had a different read of this than Will. She is described to be like 55, and that did not seem old enough for me to be like, yeah, she's going to be dead. I always assume...
It specifically says humans don't live long anymore, and so she is almost at the end of her time.
But Guyen was even older than she was, and he managed, and I don't know why. I don't know why, and you guys are right. I think you guys have the right take, but I always assumed Lane is not going to let the last confrontation go down without her being there. I assumed at some point she's going to get in, and she's going to save her the last of her strength for that 1-2 punch out. I never thought she was going to die.
That's really interesting. I really thought the author was setting it up for like, oh no, now he's going to have to step forward and do stuff now that she's gone. The mentor's figure is gone, essentially. And like, this is a really poignant moment.
They were going to butt heads. I thought what was going to happen was they were going to come back. It was going to be confrontation. She was going to be like, we have to do what we have to survive. And he was going to be like, no. And it was going to be a showdown between the two of them and him having to convince her otherwise.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
That is also what I thought.
I didn't think she was going to die.
Once I got past that.
Well, but that's the thing is, I didn't think she was going to die because I thought that was the showdown. Because the entire time, Lane has been going from being just the chief engineer to taking on more and more power and having to lead in a position that we don't normally get to see this kind of character take. But trying to do whatever she thinks is right. And I thought, oh, what a perfect showdown of her falling into the habits of those who came before her, and him having to be his entire point of the story is him having to convince her otherwise.
I did not think much of her.
I never thought she was going to die.
I just never assumed she was dead because it never says directly. If they don't die on screen, they're not dead. So I didn't assume she was dead, and especially once he got out of cryosleep afterwards, and he's like, I guess she's gone this time. I'm like, okay, so she's not dead. Dead. It was very obvious at that point. I'm like, okay, so she's somewhere.
I thought the author was going to commit, and he didn't, and I'm annoyed.
Yeah. Okay, but continue with the fast forward.
I completely understand, Will, why, given how you read that would be... and it makes so much sense why that was like a non-issue for me, because I was just like, bitch ain't dying.
Well, but also, she comes back and she doesn't really have a strong role at the end.
No, she doesn't
I was like,
at all.
Why did we waste this pathos?
This is why I thought this isn't the way I thought the ending was weak, because I thought it should have been that showdown between the two of them and her having to realize like, no, we can as humans, we can choose differently than we have before. That is the beauty of choosing humans. We are not slave to one set of impulses. We have gone past that. And so that I will say that's my problem.
That's what I was saying before about my issue with the ending, is that seems to be like, there seems to be a theme of some sort, but the problem is it's very mixed messaging. And as just a quick aside, so just to summarize in general, there must be a cat. Just to summarize in general what happens. So, they've come back to the planet, Kern's planet, right? And during this time, the spiders have yet again evolved ever more. And they even went so far as to create their own version of a spaceship, a dirigible that goes upward, upward, upward. Is this okay, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And they even create their own, primitive spacesuits as they attempt to, communicate and get higher with the, Ivana Kern. And meanwhile, Bianca, who this in this particular iteration is openly communicating, finally sends a message, but not just any message, an image. And the image, it's really cool how that happens. Read the book. But yeah, she sends an image, and finally Ivana sees, these are not monkeys. These are indeed 8-legged creatures. These are spiders. And I really did enjoy, initially she's like, monsters, they're monsters. But then she ends up like, working through some stuff, and she realizes, no, this is evolution, and they're still my creatures. And so she finally asks such a great, or like she sends back a message, I am here for whatever you need. And she is like accepting of them and wants to like support them, which is really fun. And we get a really fun space scene between Fabian and Portia as well.
Yeah, so this is the part of the book that I found really emotionally affecting, and was also
my God.
The combination of this and Lane. I kind of had to step back for a little bit because it's so uplifting, because as this Portia is doing their Apollo 13, something's going wrong with the thing, and I have to give my life to survive or to get the rocket to whatever. And like at this time, you also have Avra Kane talking to the planet and kind of having this moment of like, I am your creator. I am giving away the control that I thought I had. I am coming to understand. And it's really beautiful, the contrast of these two things together. And then the male spider sacrifices himself, and he's talking to Kane, and she's like, you won't see it, but this is worth it. This is what so many people have done before you. And I just get chills even thinking about it. The problem is that it doesn't really make any sense for Kane to Kern to have done this. Like, she, in like the space of like 3 minutes, goes through an existential crisis and is like, yeah, it's fine. She was a megalomaniac. Like, it's really weird that like she's like okay with these spiders all of a sudden.
The reason why I am accepting of this, and is because, the reason why I accepted this and was okay with it, even though I will agree it feels fast in this particular moment because of the personality shift, is because it is actively acknowledged by Ivana herself that she is no longer herself, and that what little there was of her
is still there.
Yes, but the fact of the matter is she is now Eliza. And it's because she goes to ask for Elijah. She says, Eliza, to ask for her perspective on things. And there's no answer. Instead, there's only the mutterings of the subconscious version of her old self. And so I am okay with that, because if she is machine in nature, I find it acceptable for that switch to happen like that.
For me, it is, I think I fall between you guys a little bit. For me, it felt like the paradigm shift of this entire time she thought this is what she was dealing with, and then understanding that, I can't impart my will onto them because my will conceptually is not something they can understand. And the only way to further them, because like her whole goal is to further them intellectually, like that is the goal, that more so than, because she never cared, she wanted to be a god, but it was mainly in the service of fostering new life and new intelligence. So it does make sense to me that once she realizes that the way she had been communicating with them fundamentally didn't work, and like, because she realizes in this moment, this is why so many things were confusing.
I think it was humbling for her.
Spiders.
And I think the humbling nature of it is what allowed for that crevice, for that change to happen.
But also understanding she can learn. There is stuff here beyond the human scope of Ken. And that she can get things from it.
That's the humbling nature of it.
I think the problem with it is that, I think it just happens a little too fast, and it's not set up quite enough. And I think and the other problem is that, like, I mean, because that's such a massive character change to go from I am your creator to I am your guide. It's a very parental thing of, like, the themes of this book are about parenthood kind of in this moment, because she is the parent realizing the child has outgrown them, and the child isn't going to become a doctor, and that's okay. It's not become a doctor. It's much better pay than being a painter. And like that's kind of what the themes should be, but the problem is this is not going to contrast well with the human plot line, which has no parent. So it's like, well, how much of the spiders breaking out, like what's the parallel there to the humans? And again, though, this moment is so powerful. It really works, even though you're like, this should have taken a little longer.
Yeah, and it's like Fabian's sacrifice is so beautiful, and because him and this Portia have been working as a team, and she's actually quite monogamous with this, which is not like the rest of Spider Society. Like they've gone in a different direction, and they have created a relationship that is the closest relationship any spider has to a classic human romantic one. And in his moment, he realizes they both cannot survive, but there's enough that just one of them can survive if he can do this thing, because he can't survive on his own. There's no way that's going to happen. And it's just this beautiful moment, and how Will's right. It conceptually, it should take longer. This should have taken her a couple of months, and of the spiders being like, wow, there's been no response for ages. And I think it could have been done by separating the space exploration from sending the pictures. Like if they'd sent the pictures first, then she processes, and then they kind of work together to do the space stuff, and then that whole thing happens after she's already come through the thing. I think that would have worked. It would have just needed one chapter extra in the book to make it work in a way that I think emotionally would have hit even more.
Maria's talking about pacing. People are gonna be like, but that did happen. Yes, but pacing wise, just to elongate that process a little bit.
I think so. I agree. And also I think it would have been, I agree. I think it would have just been a little bit better. Also by this point, we're at officially the point where their technology is like, really? Like they somehow have come up with muscles that just contract to be motors. And I'm like, okay, I get you like the biotech, and that's very cool, but this has now reached the point where it's a little bit becoming magic with more steps. You can't have supercomputer spiders. They're not large enough. Like, what are you doing? Or they're not small enough?
Yeah, and so it has reached that point where the ants are doing a lot of the work in a technological sense, and also in a writing sense, where the author only has so many tools to get what he needs done, and ants are the answers to everyone's problems, where like the ants have now gotten more complicated to be little tiny super, and like there's little ants, and then there's bigger ants, and then there's ants that are also acting as like the membranes of the ants do so much. It's like,
also
it's like
the issues of automation,
the fiends of the world.
Also, automation probably should have been a thing before this. Like, they mentioned at one point that the spiders are taking over a lot of roles that used to be to the males, and it's like, okay, that's actually kind of a massive seismic shift in your society that wasn't talked about. But okay, so they officially talk to her. They're like, "What are we supposed to do?" And she's like, "Whatever you want, bro." And they're like, "Okay, cool."
He's talking about Ivana Kern, and
I was going to say, originally she's like, there's people coming that are going to attack you. You need to kill them. And then we learn later that they decide to handle the conflict differently. And eventually she has to realize that she has to give them the reins. And again, this is something that should have been, it should have happened on screen.
Yes,
instead
correct.
of being something
Because
that happened
all of a sudden,
off screen. Yeah.
Well, it feels like a sudden, like an alternate universe version of events almost towards the end.
Right. So basically what happens is the ship gets back. They end up getting into a fight with the spiders because of the prisoner's dilemma we talked about earlier. And the spider's essentially bored. There's a really cool action scene. And there's one moment that's really cool where the spiders talk about how creepy the human environments are because they're just ruled by right angles and
these
like
artificial right angle. Oh, it's excellent.
Yeah. It's really cool. It's again, the author's very good at the alien point of view. And then we find out that the alien and the spiders are spreading this gas throughout the ship, and the humans are like, oh no, we're about to die. There's a really cool moment with the scientist who we haven't talked about, but who has had no emotions throughout the book, and she's panicking at the last moment as the spiders get to her.
Because she's an arachnophobe.
Yeah. And so like this whole time it's really cool, and she's been trying, she's like, okay, we're gonna just genocide them all. And Halston's like, okay, I'm not gonna do anything about this, even though I know it's wrong. Because Halston's
and he's sitting there being like, but what if they're sentient, guys?
It's so annoying.
It's so annoying. You think he's going to realize that this isn't Ivana Kern, because there's a point where he's getting messages.
It to himself, but not to them, really.
Yes. There's a point where he's getting messages, and at first he thinks Ivana Kern has just degraded so much. She's sending weird ass messages that have some words he recognizes and a bunch of other weird shit. And then eventually he does talk to Ivana Kern, and he realizes, oh no, she does talk normal. These other messages have to have been coming from the spiders. And he keeps saying to people,
No, he whispers.
They're sentient.
No, he does, and he like whispers to himself stuff. I'm like, why aren't you speaking up for the love of God?
And the idea is that even if he did say, because there's this one point where he does say, but what if they're sentient? And Lane goes, well, it doesn't matter. My job is to make sure the humans survive. They are in our way. Their sentience doesn't matter. And it's this moment where I thought this was going to be the showdown. This is why Halston had been our point of view. He'd been coming to this conclusion where he was like, no, that is exactly what we did to our world. That is what we have done to ourselves over and over and over again. Perhaps this is our time to just bow out gracefully. This society has developed. They have gotten to space travel. Are you so devoid? Are you so separated from what amazing things have happened here as we have been decaying? They have been flourishing. And I thought this was going to be a moment, and he was going to have to convince Lane, and Lane was going to have to, and there was going to be a moment where because there's this point where the spiders are like, okay, you can come down. And they have to, because like the spiders are like, don't come. And then when they're coming, the spiders are like, okay, you can come down. And basically the spiders are like, you can come down. We'll be peaceful about it. And this is when that scientist brings up the prisoner problem of, do we trust that they are actually giving us peace or that they are going to betray us? So basically they decide the only option is to go in guns blazing. That's the safest option for their survival. And what should have happened to connect all of this shit together as because one of the things they make a point of is that the spiders fundamentally have a sense of interconnection. They see world as a web of interconnected points, and so they are always looking for the connection and the use of something, which you can look at.
Just finishing the plot where this becomes useful is they've been releasing a gas throughout the ship, and then we find out, no, it wasn't a poison gas. It was actually, they had found a way. This is so bullshitty. They had found a way through mice to give these memories to humans, and not only can they give humans their memories, but they also can connect them in this web that the virus originally wanted them to connect.
What I took it as was not that they were getting memories. All they did was gave the humans the virus's ability. They gave them the virus so that when earlier, remember when we talked about when the first Portia saw the first male and realized, oh, I don't have to just eat him. I can work with him. That's all they gave the humans. They just gave the humans a modified version of the virus that would work in them so that when they saw the spiders, they recognized in each other the ability to work together.
The humanity.
Yes, the humanity.
So to speak. The fellowship, So
it's not actual memories.
Okay, and so the spiders do that, and then the humans eventually land, and then 200 years later, they're leaving together on a ship because they're working together. They've realized that they're stronger together. Their biotech and their human tech have meshed together in a really cool way. We figure out that it was Halston's grandchild or whatever, because she's like, oh, my father would have thought this was funny. My grandfather would have thought this was funny. They're going to go meet somebody else among the stars. Boom, the book is done. Okay, so here's the problem. I fucking hate books that are like, don't humans suck and my aliens... first of all, I hate... We really just need to communicate all along stories because yes, but that's so fucking incredibly difficult in the real world, and there are structural issues where even when you do communicate, there's the Red Queen problem, there's the prisoner's dilemma involved. Like, there's a lot of reasons systemically that just talking doesn't work as a solution. And again, I also hate, it just felt very Mary Sue-ish on the side of the spiders. Like, okay, you were somehow able to biochemically create this because the author thought it would be a cool way to end the book. And also the humans are dumb and underestimated the spiders, and aren't my spiders cool and like super nice. And like, I just don't like that fundamentally. And it also makes it cheap because the other problem is that what about the spiders? Why are they suddenly so humanistic? I think there's a cat involved, guys.
Yeah, I hear.
Oh, I thought it was going to be an animal. Boo.
Boo.
Okay. And so I don't like that the spiders are just people, but better. We've seen throughout the book that it's not just old empire. Humans.
Okay. What you just said.
Will always create conflict where the spiders are always going to be great together, even when their god tells them they need to create conflict.
That was my problem. is that from that point I mentioned earlier up until now, I have felt that we have taken a back seat on what spider world is, and instead we've said what you just said, which is that spiders are humans but better. And so, and I think that probably has, it almost feels like a pacing issue. Like to some degree, like, oh, I need to finish this book now at this point for this thing. Not that I'm assuming that's what it is, but that's what it feels like. It's because suddenly things start speeding up really fast. And you might say, oh, well, that's a good thing as far as pacing goes. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree. It's because especially we need to get to a climactic point. But it almost felt like the Wu Yan thing was the climactic point. And so when we get to this point at the end where we're about to have this battle, I thought that we, considering how much was left in the book, that and the way the pacing had been up to that point, I thought we were going to end on the bit where, oh, we have arrived back at Kern's world. There are spiders. We're going to do battle, and that the sequel would have the beginning of that situation. I would have much preferred that because I feel like, now granted, I don't know what this author's big vision is. Like, where is the ending point then if we're going back out into the stars and not even going onto the planet? So, which I'm also a little disappointed in as well. It's because I wanted to know more about the world. I wanted to know, how do the humans adapt to life there? That is a fascinating concept, and it feels like that would have been the natural result of all of that exploration prior to this. So, I don't know.
I had issues with, do you want to say something, Maria, first?
Yes.
Counterpoint?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I get this a lot. There is the part of me where I do like because a lot of 90% of the problems I've had in my life are solved through actual communication. So, and it's one of those things where anytime I'm anxious at work and there's a problem, if I just pick up the phone and call the person, I can solve it in like 2 minutes, where if I had been like trying to pre-solve, like it just getting on the phone and hearing like once they understand that I care and they know that I'm like, it solves a lot of things. So I'm very pro. It's why I have a better time with like the uprooted ending, where Will had the same problem, where the just communicating and getting past the problem isn't for him a satisfying ending, but it is for me. And I realized I was thinking about this because, again, Will and I had that conversation and I've been processing this ever since. And so for me, that does work as an ending. I like things where we're able to solve a conflict that way. Is it simplistic? Yes. Is it idealistic? Yes. But for me, a lot of the things that I've had the most anxiety in my life about, once I just sit down and have the conversation afterwards, I'm like, wow, that was a lot of anxiety over nothing. And so that works for me. The other side of this is, I wish we had the moment where Lane or Halston were like, no, we need to try peace. This is our way forward. Because what I like the idea that a community that comes from a point of connection, or looking for connections and how we can integrate things, is one that if like we had worked that way at certain points, how would that have like helped us? And I like the idea of sharing and understanding. And so subjectively, I liked the ending, but objectively, for all of the reasons Katie and Will have spoken about, it is weaker compared to everything else that we have built up. You know, we've seen so many, and the thing is, they don't even really talk about it. They just get a genetic understanding of the situation. We don't even give the humans the chance to realize the humanity of the others. And then maybe they use because what I thought was going to happen is we were going to end with the humans going in like, let's try peace. They're offering it to us. They sent us a message that they would give us peace. Let's chance it. We're going to die up here, or we're going to die down there. And then what was going to happen is that they were going to have to learn about each other's humanities. And then they were going to figure out how to transfer understandings to each other together as a concept. And I thought that's what was going to happen.
See, that would be such a beautiful idea if Halston had been like, no, I usually don't like this kind of a trope, but I think it would really work here if he was like, no, we are in the prisoner's dilemma, but the dilemma is, if we try to survive, we will kind of give up everything that... Do we deserve to survive if we're going to just go into another cycle of violence that's happened on the ship and happened with humanity? Like, let's just end this sad struggle at the end, the last
that's
cultural
what the
moment
ending
of...
should have been.
Yes,
It should have been
that-
humanity thinking they're embracing their end peacefully and then being given a gift of, see, because you did this, we get to continue. That's what it should have been.
Because then it's both societies having learned lessons.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. Yeah.
That's
the
it.
problem is
That's
that this... The problem is that this book should be about parenting. This should both be, it's two civilizations spawned by an older civilization, one of them specifically manipulated by the remnants of the parent, of Avra Kern, trying to get them to be worse, and the spiders in the end decide, no, we're not going to. And then the humans could have realized, okay, no, we are not that person anymore, and the two meet, both learning that they need to be good if there is a point to their civilization. The problem is, though, that is not the case. The case is that the spiders were better all along, and the humans sucked all along, and that was just genetically determined, and the only way to fix the humans was to give them the genetics that their parent had given them. So it's just... thematically, it's really kind of weird and just like, well, one of these was good and one of these was bad the whole time. And isn't it nice that the good ones helped out the bad ones?
Question, can you hear that in the background on my end? It's not happening now, but did you
Should
hear it
be okay.
before?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, no. As Ian Hand had said, and it's the same way I felt. It's a fine ending, but it wasn't earned. And again, I just feel like on a pacing level, I feel like ending on that note and then beginning, if you're gonna have a trilogy or whatever it is that's going on, like then start the new chapter there. I felt like it was very rushed to suddenly just have, and a couple 100 years have passed or whatever, and now we are off back to the stars. Like it just felt very like we ran out of funding, and so our season finale is just gonna rush our happy ending.
Wait for the next one, guys.
And it really ruins all of the thematic growth we've been working towards. Willie's really right when he says it fumbles the bag thematically, because this should have been growth for both of them. This should have been... I think there's nothing... At a certain point, I think humanity embraces its destructive things in the past. Do we deserve to continue when there's this other society that has blossomed? They are in their youth. Are we, for our survival, going to crush them down? The spiders also going, we can see them as a threat, or we can see them as, it's just, we could
Are we going to unfridge hundreds of thousands of humans just to put them into a cycle of war again? Because that's one of the things I'm always like, is like, well, what about kids? Kids don't really give a shit about your like cultural change and sacrifice. But it's like here, it's like you're going to wake up these people just to continue the cycle. Isn't it better just to slip off into the dream? We've seen that this is going to be what happens. And like, I thought that could be so powerful now that you mentioned. I hadn't thought of it at the time, but thinking about it now, like I feel like that would have been such a good ending. And Halston, like after all this time, like I don't know, maybe he locks out the computers, did like things, and is like, this is what I'm finally making the pivotal decision. And
making Lane, like having Lane make that switch, because she's started taking herself as responsible leader and saying, no, I need you not to think as humanity. I need you to think as a human for a second.
Yes. Yeah, you are not. Sorry, we're all trying to talk at the same time. You go ahead, Katie.
We're all very excited with the idea.
Well, no, all of that also would have made a really good parallel, like Will was saying about parentage, to our current predicament that we have in the world, which is that all these older politicians, all these older people that are close to death, or at least much closer to death, are not making the policy changes or the things that are necessary in order to allow for a cleaner environment and for a better future for those who are younger, and paving the way for children. It's the same concept. So that would also be a really lovely I'm forgetting the word, but basically a parallel to that idea in and of itself. So that would work really well into that theme.
Oh, yes, with Lane, I think that it would also been a good idea to be like, look, you don't, because first with Lane.
Guyen. Still wrong.
Guyen. With Guyen, he felt a need to become a god king, right? And Avra Kane, we also have the parallel of her trying to be a god king and realizing, I cannot rule the society needs to be itself. And so at this moment, Halston could have gone to Lane, as she's increasingly felt more responsible, and been like, this is not a choice you need to make for us. We don't necessarily need a God King to lead us. Like, let's just let the people decide, kind of or let the society continue without trying to control it. Again, going back to the idea of like parenthood.
And wouldn't it have been nice if there was a certain level of exhaustion among the crew as well? I don't know that this would have worked out, like literally, if this would make sense psychologically, but it would have been nice if they gave the vote, like, you know, maybe
Democracy
not
style.
Yeah. Okay, that's what I was saying.
Let's do a poll over the intercom.
And if he had just framed it as, you know, there's life here, are we going to kill it in order to make a place for? And if somehow, wouldn't it have been nice though if he had an influence on their learn? So we know that Lane has been teaching and created videos and tutorials and stuff for the children on here to know how to take care of the ship and how to make sure things go as planned, and how it would have made sense. And I don't understand why it's not also incorporated as part of it, that Holston also would have been included in those lessons as a classicist and provide lessons as well on that. And so their metaphorical child is the children on this ship, and their choice to not destroy the life on there is the genesis of the new human soul, of making a new, you know, a different path.
I don't know. I almost would have liked if there hadn't been any ship born. And so when he asks these people, do you want to fight? Is that the life that you want to let, like, you know, and they all had just been like, no, we're tired. We're tired of being this remnant. We want to move on to the new thing. Like, we're not going to, like, we want to go quietly into the night. It's peaceful.
That's exactly what I would have, like, preferred if there hadn't been any shipborne by the time, like, they woke up at this point, like, they died out and they, like, started doing, like, where everyone who got pregnant just was embryo. So we had like the kids for further, but there weren't any more kids at this point, because I think that is such a good choice. And it's just such a, it's human in the sense that we can be sacrifice ourselves for other stuff, but to understand that life outside of just ours, and because like, is that not the great thing that, so I read this book called Beloved Beasts, and it gave me hope because it's about the history of the conservation movement. And it gave me hope for humanity, because here were these individual people at different points in history who realized this other life is important and we have negatively affected them. And it is our job to stop affecting them, but also to try right the ship a bit. And it gives you that hope. And so to know that that is available on an individual basis, to look at an entire, I fail to believe that an entire society of people that have been on the ship, that have been of a decaying race, their world is gone, they fucked it up. Humanity fucked it up. And at every step, these people trapped on this ship have made bad decisions at multiple points. To look at this society that has, from spiders, created, I mean, I don't know how you look at that web they create around the world that immediately reads like a protection web. And you go,
be like, yeah, let me go set that on fire.
Let me fuck it up. And that not one of them, because that's the thing is, I understand the mob mentality, but to have Holston come up and be like, but wait, guys, they have done something massive. They have created technology outside of the image of, you know, like, it's possible to live outside of what we consider humanity to be. And it just,
yeah, it fumbles it at the last minute. And that's kind of the thing I realized as I was ending the book. I was like, the things I really liked about this book were the world building and the plot and the characters. And the themes weren't, I was looking forward to them, but I hadn't had any proof that he could handle them complexly. And so it kind of makes sense that he ends it with, I want to go on to my next world building journey. And the world building is what fixed the plot, not this is a thematically satisfying book.
Yeah. I will say the moment where Lane, because by this point, Lane is like in her 80s old, like her old lady now. there's a moment where they land, and again, I don't, if this had happened the way I wanted it, where Lane and him decide to embrace peace and they come down peacefully, she gets laid down on the grass because she dies, and the spiders look upon it and they realize that this human is dying, but she is happy and she is content in this moment. And I cried because I love Lane, and just the idea of her touching grass, because like one of the things you learn about this lot of humans is they never had a green world. This is their first touch of what Earth might have been like in their past, what humanity evolved into, the home. And it just is, and it would have been better if it came after all the stuff that I described and then we ended up in this moment, but it still got me. He still can write an emotionally effective scene.
No, even in the ending when they're going out to the stars, I was like, what are? And it has that very old school, like, what is in the stars? It's and that's the moment I also felt during the Apollo 13 mission. And that's the thing is, he's an incredibly talented writer. There's a lot of little homages. Almost, again, we have like a little bit of a war one. We have a little Indiana Jones, Apollo 13. And like each of them work really well. I was about halfway through, I decided we would read the second book for next month's mid-month. And like, I don't regret that now, but I'm a little bit less enthusiastic now that we've gotten to the ending. But also, like, I'm so interested to see what he comes up
planned
with. You know what I mean? I think also he didn't really want to write like a whole war narrative, which is what I thought the book was going to be going. Is like book 2 is now that the humans and the spiders are together. I like our ending thematically better. There's so many books that like. I still think about our Spirit Cuts the Water ending with the Empress and the old lady, and I'm like, that's so beautiful. Oh wait, it's not in the book.
Yeah, I'm really good at because like it's kind of where I see what the emotional core could have been. And it just, and also that's what I thought that's why I was like, Lane's not dead. We're going to have her and Halston are going to have a showdown. They love each other. It's going to be a thing. And she has to learn that she has to come out of this and think differently. He's been having these thoughts. That's what we're doing, right? That's what we're doing, right?
No.
All right. Well, that was exhausting.
Yeah, I'm tired. I'm not going to edit this video because nobody's going to watch it, but that was...
I think it was a great discussion.
Yeah, it's a great... we always have great discussions. We're the only people on BookTube who do. Everybody else has like the dumbest... We're at the end of the video. We have like... BookTube, again, the reason I started this channel is because so many people are doing fascinating video essays on science, on TV, on film, on video games. And then you come to BookTube and they're like, 5 aesthetic reads for a cozy time.
Okay, my experience, my very, very shallow experience, because I've absolutely no interest, is just more like, let me give you a small summary of the book. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, okay, there's the premise. Go enjoy the book. And I'm like, wait a second. Is this like an advertisement or is this a review? I don't understand.
Yep.
And so few specifics, so much vibes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, look, you got... Here's a vibe for you. That mess over there in the water bottle.
I thought you were going to show your spider, and I was like, we got to give...
No, guys, there's too many arachnophobes, so I'm not allowed to show Cheeto.
Yes.
Look, I get it. I get triggering. Again, I kind of would have liked a little bit of a heads up that this book was going to be so existential, because it didn't ruin my evening, but it kind of ruined it, because I just felt like, oh God, there's no point in anything. I'm having these emotions, and like, I don't... So I get it. Triggering sucks. Yeah,
at least it happened at night, so you could go to sleep and restart yourself.
Yeah, no, that is exactly correct. All right, thank you all for joining us. We love you, our parasocial darlings.
Bye.